Even among Tier 3 experts, he was a formidable foe that caused others to tremble in fear. However, Little Hut in the Woods shook his head and smiled. I'm not worried about that. The commissioner frowned in confusion. He felt contempt, but he didn't care and didn't take it to heart. He just waited for his answer. The cabin in the woods wanted to address him, but after thinking for a long time, he realized that he had never said his name when he introduced himself. Marcus, the commissioner prompted. Well, Mr. Marcus, you have the certificate of the Hall of Discipline, and I have verified your identity. You come on behalf of Rome. Our Doomsday campus is not a place that doesn't know etiquette. We should warmly welcome you. The teacher will not be arrogant enough to refuse the emissary of the Hall of Discipline. Little Hut in the Woods thought for a moment and explained seriously, but the key is that he has been very busy recently. I don't know if he has time to take care of other things. With that, Little Hut in the Woods got up, took off his coat from the hanger, picked up the car key, and waved to him. You will understand when you see it. Please come with me. The commissioner was puzzled and got up to follow him. In this way, a car soon drove out of the garage, past the busy construction sites on both sides, passed through the gradually congested downtown, and even saw the legendary Foundry Research Center that was gradually growing like living metal. In this way, they gradually went out. In the passenger seat, Marcus was expressionless, but his body gradually tensed up. Relax. If we have any bad intentions, we don't need to take you so far. Little Hut in the Woods seemed to know what he was thinking. Do you see the two people drinking tea in the campus gatehouse? The older one is called Tian Tian. You may not have heard of him. The other person who plays chess with him is called Kamigawa. Marcus was silent for a moment and suddenly asked, Which Kamigawa? The one you have heard of. He was a fighter for the general. After he was laid off, he was sent to Doomsday by the Sword Saint. Little Hut in the Woods explained, This is Doomsday. We are not interested in your entanglements outside, and we have not fallen to the extent of attacking guests. You can rest assured. Marcus did not speak. Little Hut in the Woods glanced at him and did not answer again. In the silence, Marcus heard the sound of the tide gradually rising in the distance. A cool sea breeze blew through the lowered window. Under the afternoon sun, the blue sea in the distance showed a line. A distant sound faintly came from the wind. It was like the gentle sound of a cello, long and deep. The solemn sound of drums was embedded in it, forming a vast sound that spread in all directions. It seemed that the sound of the tide was also responding to the rhythm of the melody and blending into it. In the end, it turned into a complex and solemn symphony. Symphony number 9? Marcus raised his hand, took off the flat lens in front of him, and couldn't help but look out of the window. When he recalled the information of the King of Doomsday, he suddenly understood. If he didn't have such a pursuit of art, how could he be called a disaster musician? In comparison, in order to satisfy his own preferences, spending a lot of effort to build a concert hall on the beach was not worth mentioning at all. He had seen more extravagant things. Compared with those things, this pure passion from the heart was even more admirable. However, when they turned around the ridge, they did not see the huge and solemn concert hall that they had expected. There was not even any sign of construction. There was not an entire orchestra playing here. There was only a bare beach and a small dock that stretched forward into the sea. From a long distance, they could see the back of the person sitting at the end of the dock and a fishing rod in his hand that was thrown into the deep sea. The vast sea and the people were connected by a line. As a result, a mighty and magnificent symphony sprouted from the sea. The surging tide rippled in front of him like a blurry waveform, revealing the terrifying power surging in the undercurrent below. Under the interference of a fishing line, The surging tide was casually fiddled with by an invisible palm, colliding with each other and bursting out a roar, faintly turning into an earth-shattering noise. The sea seemed to be hissing, angry from the melody, roaring, singing, and chanting. It rose endlessly towards the highest level guided by the melody. Just like that, it silently disappeared and returned to the sea. In the end, the layers of waves dissipated in an instant, replaced by a calm surface of water that was as smooth as a mirror. It reflected the sky and the tide in the distance. Only the lingering sound was left, slowly dissipating. Everything was like a miracle, but there was no fluctuation of any source substance from it, as if the scene of all things singing was just a coincidence. And at some point, Marcus was already sweating profusely. He finally understood why the cabin in the forest showed such an expression when he made a promise. He didn't need to guarantee Huaisher's safety. In front of that person, he couldn't even guarantee his own safety. He already knows we're here. The car stopped at the end of the road, and the cabin in the forest said, "Looks like you're quite lucky." A few days ago, he didn't want to see anyone outside, nor did he want to be disturbed. The youth raised his hand and pointed at the back. "No matter why you're here, you can go and tell him, Mr. Marcus, but please remember to be quick." "Is there a time limit?" Marcus asked. No. In a short silence, the youth, who seemed to have grasped the situation from beginning to end, suddenly showed a strange expression, and couldn't help but sigh. "If I'm late, I won't be able to make it for dinner, and I'll be very miserable." Marcus was stunned for a moment, not understanding what kind of dinner could make such a young man worry, but he didn't intend to waste time. He pushed open the car door and walked straight to the distant figure. The closer he got, the more he could feel the pain of every step. It was as if the vast sea in front of him was pressing down on him. In the calm, there was a terrifying power that could overturn everything. He was approaching a burning volcano, but all of a sudden, all of this disappeared. The silent and calm sea suddenly became turbulent, and the surging sea rushed to the beach and the reef, bursting with noise. The fishing rod had been pulled out of the sea, and there was nothing on the hook. On the dock, the man wearing a sun hat turned around and looked at him. He took off the sunglasses on his face, full of curiosity. "Are you here to collect the fishing fee?" Marcus was stunned for a moment, and then he saw the man laugh and wave his hand. "I'm just kidding. Hello, I'm Huaisher. How should I address you?" He didn't ask any questions in a condescending manner. After picking up the fishing rod, the excessively young man took the initiative to step forward and extended his hand. Marcus didn't know how to react for a moment. "Hello, I'm Marcus." Marcus was stunned, but he maintained his professionalism and explained his identity: Rome's Hall of the Pharaoh, an agent of the Mercury Agency. He gripped Huaisher's hand carefully, letting go as soon as he touched her. "Hall of the Pharaoh? You don't seem to have anything to do with me?" Huaisher was puzzled. "What's the matter?" "In fact, I received a commission from the Rome Space Agency to personally deliver this item to you." Marcus raised his hand, untied the shackles on his hands, and presented the box in his hand to the man in front of him. "I'll wait for your answer." The box was not big, and it was not heavy, only the weight of a woman's bag. Huaisher held it in his hand and didn't feel any danger, but when he looked carefully, he found that there was no place for him to open the box. He wanted to ask, but Marcus had already turned around and stood in the distance, calmly waiting for Huaisher to call him forward again. Huaisher tilted his head, picked up the box in his hand, and sat back on the chair. He looked back and forth and found that the box seemed to be pure iron, without any unlocking or keyhole. Even with his perception, he couldn't find any welding places. All the metal crystals were arranged smoothly, and there were no cracks. There seemed to be some kind of alchemy array inside, maintaining the safety of the item. If he disassembled it, Violently, the things inside would be destroyed. Huaisher raised his eyebrows. A problem sent to him? What was the Roman genealogy doing? Chapter 8:25. In fact, this thing did not stump Huaisher for long at all. There was no need for the hand of confinement that was now integrated with the casting furnace. With Huaisher's attainments in metals, he had already figured out the structure of the internal alchemy array through the box. Then, he just found a few places, entered the source substance a few times, and tried the password to open it automatically. The box was just to verify Huaisher's identity. The person who opened it must be an alchemist proficient in metals. But when the box shrank and disintegrated inch by inch, there was nothing inside. There was only a symbol in the core. That was the emblem of the Helios workshop. Now, as the complex structure of the box continued to change and shrink, in the end, it actually overlapped into a fist-sized iron ball and fell into Huaisher's hand. Through the fine hollow texture on the surface, he could feel the source substance moving in the complex array inside. Then, dozens of layers of the core moved, and in the end, it formed a map that he had never seen before. At that moment, the rope of sorrows sent out a profound sound. It made Huaisher freeze in place. According to the agreement from a long time ago, the alchemy workshop, the Helios chariot called out to the alchemist who had made a contract with it. Marcus did not come on behalf of Rome at all, but this notice was passed on by the Mercury organization on behalf of him. Now, as the iron ball slowly unfolded, there was a faint flame in it. The Helios workshop was waiting for Weischer's response. The simplest way was to accept or refuse. Weischer fell into silence. In the long silence, he raised his head and stared at the city behind him, the area that was gradually growing and flourishing. Everything had changed too quickly. In just a few years, he had changed from a wandering ascendant to a pivotal role in the entire Ingzhou. He was no longer the young man who had no choice. He had the power to say no, and could even repay the help from Helios 100 times over. Moreover, when he signed the contract, he did not know the contents of it. He could have ignored this call. No one could criticize Weischer's handling of this matter. But for some reason, the instant he received this invitation, what emerged in his heart was not resistance. Instead, it was indescribable joy. Even the sea breeze blowing from afar seemed to have become fragrant. A new adventure called to him. He chuckled softly. He no longer hesitated. "Have you decided?" Behind the screen, Russell scratched his head. Helios is not a peaceful place. Recently, it seems to be in a lot of trouble. Otherwise, the invitation letter would not have been delivered by the Roman genealogy. If you want to go out and relax, there are more and better choices. Look, isn't Shambhala a picturesque place? Weischer laughed. "I feel like I'll be in trouble no matter where I go." "Is there a difference between Shambhala and Helios? Since you've decided, I won't object." Russell pinched his chin. "Thinking about it, I'm quite surprised that you've been able to stay in Donbua for so long. In the past, you'd always leave when you caused trouble. This time, you've cleaned up your own mess. I think you've learned your lesson." Weischer could not help but roll his eyes. "Don't pretend to be obedient after taking advantage of me, okay?" he retorted. "I've been a tool for so long. Can you stop thinking about making arrangements for me? Look at what you're saying. This is a teacher's love for his student. You're hurting my heart." Russell laughed strangely and asked, "How's your body?" "It's not wise to go out in this state. You can't go into the abyss just to fix a car, right?" Weischer sighed and scratched his head. "It's okay. I'll bring Beelzebub. I still have Supreme anyway. At least I can run away if things go wrong." After getting used to his extremely strange luck, he had accepted the fact that something would definitely happen whenever he went out. It was impossible for him not to be prepared. After personally witnessing the duel between Elder Luo and the Sword Saint, his own development of resonance had reached a whole new level. Resonance may not be the most destructive of Supreme, but it was definitely the most versatile type. He had not been sitting by the beach these days to fish for fun. Instead, he had seized the time to consolidate the experience and understanding he had gained from that battle. In the end, what he had gained was not the scene that Marcus had seen, but a more subtle perception. The scale of the ocean rumble seemed terrifying, but it was actually the result of more than 2 hours of channeling by the beach. Apart from training his control, it did not have any actual combat value. His opponent would not let him channel for 2 hours and then stand still and let him stuff the ocean rumble into his stomach. Until now, Weischer could only say that his Supreme was just a beginner. He did not dare to say how good it was, but at least he had a chance to escape when facing those unreasonable opponents in the past. Running fast was better than anything else these days. "Really? Let's hope you can escape." Russell's smile became strange. Without waiting for Weischer to ask again, he suddenly snapped his fingers. "Speaking of which, it's about time." "What time?" "The time to place the order." Russell lowered his head and looked at his watch. "It should be now." Before he finished his words, there was a knock on the door. After pushing open the door, he saw a familiar smiling face with a camera on his shoulder. "Hello, yesterday's delivery." The delivery man introduced himself and then asked directly, "Name?" Weisher turned around and looked at the screen expressionlessly. Russell had already picked up the teacup and pointed at him with his mouth. "Hurry up and start your performance." "I've been waiting for this." Weisher closed his eyes and pointed at the corridor outside the door. "Get out. Don't brother. This is a special request from the customer. Aren't we afraid of sending it to the wrong person?" The delivery man squeezed out a smile from the gap of the door. "Please cooperate. Can't you just cooperate?" "Cooperate my ass. I didn't buy anything. Get out. It's a package from the Abyss Archaeological Team. A Mr. Lucian sent it to you, and he specially ordered it for express delivery." The courier raised the package and shamelessly squeezed his way in. "Brother, I'm 100% confident that my customers will give me good reviews. Just treat it as a favor and help me out. Let's go through the process." The corner of Weisher's eyes began to twitch. After a series of exhausting traditional performances, Weisher finally got her hands on the long metal box. She found that it was quite heavy inside. There were actually several layers of it, all of which were of the highest standard of single-use containment containers. Just the outer packaging alone was worth millions of dollars. What the hell? Weisher scratched his head, wondering what his brother had sent him. Isn't this quite fast? After drinking enough tea, Russell finally put down the teacup and explained, "When I asked for inventory, I found that there was no stigmata relic suitable for you, so I made an order with the archaeological team. I didn't expect Lucian to come personally. It seems that you have a good relationship with him." "Huh." Weisher was stunned. He picked up the box in his hand and asked, "Stigmata relic? This?" "Yes, it's a precious item recovered by the archaeological team from the quiet area under the 22nd depth area. It's a fragment left behind by the Abyss Exploration Outpost of the Republic. Over the years, the dragon summoning flute has been searching day and night and finally found its trace." Russell waved his hand and said indifferently, "Open it and take a look." "Why, sure. It's yours." Weisher reached out and opened the lock on the top, opening the outer layer of seal layer by layer. In the end, after opening the last inner cover, he saw the incomplete creation sealed in the core. It was like a rusty iron rod, half the height of a person. The grayish-black color was not conspicuous. If one did not pay attention, it would be thrown away like garbage. However, when Weisher clenched and pulled it out, it emitted a high-pitched sound. A cracking sound burst out from under Weisher's feet. He subconsciously channeled the burst of pressure into his feet, causing the entire office building to suddenly shake. The alarm was triggered, and an ear-piercing sound rang out. Countless traces of rust faded in an instant, revealing the color of steel. Dark green waves faintly surrounded it, revealing the echo of the sea. The inscriptions of the past had all disappeared, leaving only vague engravings to prove its identity. At that moment, the stigmata of the same lineage resonated and awakened the sleeping miracle. Xiang Juan, who had been silent for a long time in hell, woke up, revealing a vague outline. Sensing the divinity of Great Si Ming, it let out an unruly clang in Weisher's hand. It almost broke free from his hand, but soon it found that it had nowhere to go. The power to break free quickly weakened, and in the end, it returned to its usual state. Only the rusty shell revealed the wear and tear marks of the vicissitudes of life. When Weisher took a closer look, he found the sharp crack at the front of the iron rod. It was actually a broken part of the weapon, but Xiangjuan's power was clearly unblemished and even exceeded Weisher's imagination. That wild and fierce aura made one's scalp tingle. It was not like the gentle Xiangshui lord, but more like a raging flood that wreaked havoc in the mortal world. Passing water spear? It's really you. Russell stared at the crack and lowered his eyes. Long time no see, Ing Fangzhou. Passing water spear? Was this originally a spear? Huaisher carefully examined the weapon in her hand. She could feel the loneliness and viciousness within it. She could almost empathize with the weapon itself, that indescribable remorse. The pain entrusted to it felt like it was tearing his soul apart. He hated that the raging waters would never return, and that it would be difficult to return to the past. It was too late. Even if he searched all the iron in Jiuzhou, it would not be enough to make a mistake. By the time he recovered from the intense headache, tears of blood had already flowed down from the corners of his eyes. Be careful. Why sure, don't go through other people's diaries. Russell said, this is the hatred of the old seniors. This was a genuine relic of the stigmata. It was the crystallization of remorse left by the predecessor of the Road of Heaven's Inquisition, the former Lord of the Clouds, Ing Fangzhou. Chapter 8:26. Should I say that you're lucky or unlucky? Russell sighed softly. If you're unlucky, you might not be able to find this relic that's most suitable for you. But if you're lucky, the passing water spear is incomplete. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Xiangjuan, but a tier 4 Yunzhongjian. It's so subtle that it gives me a headache. If the passing water spear was still complete, it would be Yunzhongjian's stigmata. Huaisher wouldn't need to find an item containing the divinity of the sea to prepare for advancement. He only needed the crystal of the Fountain of Light to complete the final ritual. But the problem was that the former Yunzhongjian had already turned into Xiangjuan, and the former passing water spear had become a broken iron rod. Moreover, it was unruly and had an astonishing hostility. It was not far from being completely eroded by hell. Instead of saying that he's dying, it's better to say that he hates the water, right? Luo Su said, until the very end. I'm afraid he was still hating himself. That guy, what can you say about him? Huaisher stroked the passing water in his hand and felt the sorrowful sound in it. He couldn't help but ask, Ing Fangzhou? Is that the name of that person? Yes, your senior. He was even older than me. When I became a member of the Utopia, he was already a mainstay. He had always been a loner and didn't like to deal with others, nor did he like to place his hopes on others. Russell said, now that I think about it, I really don't know if I should say that he was arrogant or violent. When I worked under him, I would be protected like a baby. Sometimes, even his subordinates couldn't stand it. They complained and complained countless times. That guy always thought that he could handle everything alone. But there were always times when he couldn't handle it. Russell sighed, silently. After so many years, I still don't understand why he didn't call for help until the Abyss outpost sank. Did he not want to burden us? If they knew that he was still alive at that time, everyone would have rushed to rescue him. Maybe he just didn't have the face to face others, so he wanted to die. Weisher was silent. In the silence, he could hear the distant echoes from the broken body of the spear. It was a wave of regret that swept through like a surging tide, as if it would never end. He lamented the fall of that ideal. It would resist anyone's control and would only seal itself off until it was silently annihilated in the darkness. The rolling Yangtze River flows eastward, leaving behind only those who regret it for 10,000 years. He hated water. Then let's call it hateful water. Weisher swung his hand, and the broken gun in his hand buzzed, causing the entire building to tremble again. It was the water flowing in the pipes that caused ripples. Violent energy surged. "Do you need me to get you another one?" Russell asked. "It seems like you're not very compatible with it." "No need. It's to my liking." Weisher lowered his head and looked at the body of the spear that buzzed like a dragon on his knee. He whispered to it, "Before this hatred dissipates, we still have a long time to be friends." As if it understood Weisher's words, the body of the hateful water spear shook again, causing a crack between his thumb and forefinger. Blood seeped out, and then the wound quickly healed and disappeared. Russell laughed. "Be careful. It has a temper." "I know." Weisher put it back into the box and shrugged indifferently. "Anyway, I have a chatterbox here. They can talk all the time." With Seong-jun's relic, the hateful water, Weisher at least had power and weapon that he could use during the period when the sacred mark was disconnected. Moreover, this power was very compatible with his own supreme, and there was a lot of room for him to use. "So, is there anything else that you need help with?" Russell asked at the end. "Yes, there's a lot." Weisher rubbed his face. "I'm lacking a lot of things here. Could you help me settle the spring of light crystal?" While the spring of light crystal was precious, the ivory tower was so huge that there should not be a single piece, right? "Of course there's such a thing," Russell answered matter-of-factly. "Although it's basically extinct, the ivory tower is a remnant of the utopia and naturally has a lot of it. Excluding the one I used for my ascension, there are now 4 pieces. One is installed on the iron crystal base, the core of the Grandmaster's furnace. Another is installed in the dragon summoning flute, the most important lens. The other 2 are kept in the 2 abyss campuses, important components of the main framework of creation." Luo Su shrugged and replied with a smile, "Any one of these 4 places can help you advance. Which one do you choose?" Weisher rolled his eyes. "Then can I have all of them?" "That will depend on your own efforts." Russell egged him on. "Go talk to Isaac, Mikhail, Ramanujan, and Madame Chun, as long as you persuade them. I will definitely support you unconditionally." He might as well not have said it. Weisher could not be bothered with him. There were 4 of these things in the ivory tower, but these 4 things were used in the vital parts of the ivory tower. Weisher was not so arrogant that he would reverse the organization's plan for his own ascension. The dragon summoning flute, the iron crystal base, and the 2 abyss campuses. One was the top radar in the entire territory, the other was the exploration base of Hell, and the other 2 were the assets that Russell had worked so hard to gather over the years. If any of them were missing, the ivory tower would suffer a great loss. "But aren't you going to the Helios workshop?" Russell asked. "Go ask them. Helios definitely has these things." "Really? Look at what you're saying." "Do you think I would lie to?" Before he finished speaking, after noticing Weisher's numb eyes, Russell suddenly coughed twice. "Don't worry. I will never lie to you about this. Even if the entire territory is destroyed, Helios Treasury will definitely have these things." "You've been there?" Weisher's eyes became more and more suspicious. He even began to guess if this old guy had done something there when he was young, and now he wanted to use him as a scapegoat. Isn't this nonsense? Russell was about to get angry. Don't tell me you still haven't figured out what the fountain of light is? Isn't it just a spring? Looking at Weischer's confused face, Russell was a little angry. After staring at him for a long time, he could not help but look up to the sky and sigh. He forgot that this thing was not something Weischer could access. In the end, that woman Tanguy dropped the ball and did not even mention this. Listen up, Weischer. The so-called fountain of light is not some spring water, border, or place in hell. It's a phenomenon. It was a phenomenon created by the gods. To be precise, it was a phenomenon created when the gods fell. When the gods of the past faced death, their enormous bodies would fall from the highest point of the realm. The will of heaven, the miracles, and even the origin substance that they had accumulated throughout their lives would flow out from their gradually crumbling bodies like blood, turning into a vast stream of light that penetrated the heavens and the earth. Collapse! All the way to the deepest part of hell. This was the last favor left behind by the gods. The magnificent rainbow light that penetrated the present realm, border, and hell seemed to distort time, connecting the past and the future, creating countless untouchable mirages. It was because of this that it was called the Fountain of Light, and the crystallization of the Fountain of Light was the essence condensed from the dissipated providence. In other words, Weischer was dumbfounded for a long time before he reacted. If I want this thing, I have to find a god to stab to death first? Regardless of whether you can stab them to death or not, the gods are now about to become rare creatures, Weischer. Russell looked at him with a disappointed expression. They are strictly protected by the Astronomical Society, okay? There were only 3 gods left in the world. The fate of the other one was unknown. If one of them died for Weischer's advancement, it would be a big joke. This was not a matter of the genealogy fighting to the death, but the Astronomical Society would make Weischer, this traitor, die without a burial place. You can't do anything about the living ones, but you can think of killing them. Russell's voice trembled. Let's not talk about other things. Isn't there a section above Helios? You don't want meat or blood. You just want a crystal fragment, less than the size of a finger. You've been a tool for so long. How can you not even talk about wages? Amazing! Weischer felt that he had reached a new height of stupidity. Such a precious thing, you want it just because you want it. Do you really think Helios is your home? If it's not for you, can't you steal or rob it? Russell's face was full of resentment and disgust. He slammed the table and scolded angrily. Back then, as soon as the words came out, he felt that something was wrong and forcibly swallowed them. Weischer's eyes became dangerous. What did you do back then? Russell looked away, waved his hand, and said, Wasn't the price not agreed? Then I took a little more for myself. I worked so hard for so long. What's wrong with taking a light-reflecting crystal? So, you really did do it before. Weischer felt that his worldview had received a new shock. Was there something wrong with the style of the celestial genealogy? It was not without reason that humans and ghosts hated them. They really touched them wherever they went. Don't say that the teacher didn't take care of you. Weischer, I've already given you the method. We don't have any surplus food. It's up to you whether to have a fat New Year or starve. Russell said with a solemn face, Just do it. I believe in you. Can't you King believe in something better? Weischer did not want people to have any expectations of him when it came to breaking the law. Unfortunately, before Weischer could speak, Russell had already hung up the phone. It was already the next day when Weischer accepted the fact that he had fallen into a trap. After arranging the rest of the work, Weischer once again met Marcus from the Mercury Agency. Mr. Weischer, I have reported your reply. Marcus reported, Next, I will accompany you to Rome. We will rest in Pompeii for a day, and then take the manned spacecraft of the Rome Space Agency to Minerva 4 space station in the early morning of the next day, and then go to the moon a day later. When you get there, you can— Wait. Huaisher felt that his ears were not right. He raised his eyes and looked at the opposite side. Where did you just say we were going? Marcus adjusted his glasses and answered calmly, the moon. Chapter 8:27. I'm going to the moon. All of a sudden, I'm going to be sent to the moon. It shocked Huaisher for a whole year. Wait a minute, isn't there something wrong with your itinerary? He asked doubtfully, why do you want to go to the moon? Can't you open a portal? With that, he gestured a circle. We'll arrive at Helios in a flash. Sorry, the Helios chariot is still outside the Earth-Moon space. It's not covered by the 3 major blockades of the present realm. Neither the Bifrost nor the border movement can be connected. We can only reach it by the most basic physical means. Marcus replied calmly. The whole process is estimated to take about 4 days. You can board the Helios workshop. Huaisher's jaw almost dropped to the ground. So, it was not just going to the moon. After reaching the moon, they had to fly out again. This was 2F** King exciting. And the problem was that in the vast space, there was no way to escape if there was a problem. What if the ship blew up? He finally understood the strange look on Russell's face when he said that he could escape. I'm not mentally prepared at all. Huaisher said, I'm seasick. It's okay. We'll provide seasickness medicine. Mine is more serious. We have tranquilizers. In silence, Huaisher and Marcus looked at each other. Big brother, if you don't know how to chat, we'll kill the conversation. After a long time, Huaisher rubbed his face and sighed. Seriously, can I go back on my word? He was really a little scared. Marcus did not speak. He was calm as always. Okay. Huaisher shook his head. Since he had said that he would go, there was no need to go back on his word. Besides, he was also envious of the alchemy in Helios. Wasn't it just taking a rocket to the sky? It was as if no one had a dream of landing on the moon. I only have one request, Huaisher said. Please go ahead. Let's go to Rome first. He said, I have a friend there. I promised her that if I go to Rome, I must meet her. We are pressed for time. But there's always room to squeeze, right? At this point, he couldn't help but scratch his head and look at his office. Where could he find a gift for her? They packed their clothes, packed their bags, and stuffed their equipment. He bid farewell to the crows in the cage of dreams. Make the following personnel arrangements. And most importantly, after giving the 2 students enough homework to do for 2 months, Huaisher carried his saddlebag out of the door in high spirits. At 2:00 in the afternoon, they arrived at Rome, the capital of Rome, known as the City of 10,000 Gods, a place where all the sources of the Western genealogy gathered. Although the name of a country's capital sounded like a Russian doll, the exotic scenery quickly attracted Huaisher's attention. There were too many things for the eyes to take in. It was great to go out alone. She could do whatever she wanted, and there were no annoying bad things following her around. Where are we going next? Asked the crow on his shoulder. Of course, we are going to the capital. Huaisher subconsciously answered halfway. Suddenly, he realized something and turned his head sluggishly. The smile on his face stiffened when he saw the black-hearted creature jumping around on his shoulder. Why are you here? Why can't I be here? Tanguy asked in confusion. Aren't you my contractor? No. Why did you suddenly appear? Huaisher was dumbfounded. Haven't you been appearing and disappearing all of a sudden recently? A mature and wise big sister will always appear in the right place at the right time. Isn't that reasonable? Tanguy blinked her big eyes. Besides, I have been reflecting on myself recently. Am I not caring enough for my contractor? Am I not gentle enough? Am I not understanding enough? Am I not able to listen to my contractor's troubles? Caring, gentle, understanding, listening to troubles. The corner of Weischer's mouth twitched, and he doubted from the bottom of his heart, do those words you said have anything to do with you? In short, I've already turned over a new leaf. Tong Ji raised her little wings and wrapped them around his neck, assuring him, you see, I'm just trying to make up for what I'm lacking. That's why I've resolutely decided to put down the work that's worth a few billion to spend a happy trip with you. All right, since you've said so, let's pray for Helios next. No, we have to pray for the manned space shuttle first. I hope Rome is fine. Weischer only felt his vision go dark. He saw his dark future full of arrangements. Just as Weischer was petrified, Tangi stood comfortably on top of Weischer's head. She spread her wings and felt the wind blowing against her face in a foreign country. It was as if she wanted to embrace the relaxing and warm vacation that was coming. By the way, where did you say we were going? She asked casually. Weischer rolled his eyes, walked into the taxi, and told the driver the destination. Imperial University. Name? In front of the Imperial University, an old guard on the steps held a long staff and looked down at the backpacker in front of him. Young man, the Imperial University's opening day is on Wednesday. You came at the wrong time. Why did they like to do this everywhere they went? Is there something wrong with you? It's not a tour, it's a visit. Weischer raised his hand and took out his work ID from the ivory tower from his pocket, as well as his passport with the Roman genealogy stamp. In fact, he still had a military officer's ID from the Astronomy Association, which could allow him to do whatever he wanted in the present state. However, there was generally no need to show the military officer's ID. This was because when they needed a military officer, everyone usually acted directly. After they became a corpse, no one knew how to ask for the ID. Therefore, the reputation of military officers was generally not very good. To some extent, they were even more annoying than the local snake inspector. Therefore, in order to avoid unnecessary accidents, Weischer decided to endure for the time being. Well, 3 seconds. If this old man didn't know what was good for him, he could smile crookedly. However, the scene he expected didn't happen. After the old man took the ID, although he was doubtful about Weischer's age, he still took out his reading glasses from his pocket, put them on the bridge of his nose, and unfolded the ID to look at it carefully. He frowned. He looked down at the ID, and then looked at the young man in front of him. His frowned eyebrows curled up strangely. That strange expression was as if he had seen something incredible. Why, sure. He confirmed again. You. Yes, me. Weischer asked in confusion. Is there a problem? No. Please come in. Please come in. The old man quickly put on a serious look and stepped aside, motioning for Weischer to come in. However, when Weischer walked in, he heard the old man run to the corner, slapping the wall and laughing wildly. What the hell? Weischer scratched his head in confusion, but then he heard a surprised voice. It came from the front. It almost broke. Weischer! A girl in the square in front of him exclaimed, Look, Weischer is here. Oh my God, it's really Weischer. He really appeared. I thought it was a rumor. Oh my God. Weischer was stunned for a moment and looked around. The pedestrians who were originally walking stopped in their tracks and followed his line of sight in astonishment. Then they could not help but smile, as well as a pleasant surprise that could not be faked. There were even bold girls waving at him and calling enthusiastically, Weischer, come here quickly. Let sister hug you. Come to mommy. Let me touch you, okay? Weischer was stunned and subconsciously took a step back. He covered his chest in horror. They were half a world away. Was he really that popular in Rome? Why were his fans still so enthusiastic? Wasn't this a little too spirited? They hugged and hugged him as soon as they met, and even wanted to take his virginity. This was too exciting. For a moment, he didn't know whether he should reject them seriously or welcome them. But no matter what, he had to respond to the enthusiasm of his fans. Just as he showed a gentle smile and opened his arms to welcome the storm of female fans, he felt a push from behind. Seeing that he didn't respond, he pushed again. "Hey, brother, make way. You're in the way." Huaishur waved his hand impatiently. "I'm having a fan meeting here. Don't interrupt." But then he touched a hand of fur. A hand! When he looked back blankly, he saw a giant dog standing behind him without him black and white color scheme. Unruly eyes, a pair of blue eyes, and a crooked mouth at him with a wicked smile. Then she arrogantly raised her head and pushed him away. She walked forward with small, elegant steps. Soon after, she was surrounded by enthusiastic big sisters in the midst of cheers. Screams of surprise sounded. "It's really Huaishur!" Someone shouted excitedly. "I touched Huaishur. Huaishur's fur is so soft. His stomach is so soft too. His paws are so good too." Countless hands covered the giant dog that was as tall as a person. Surrounded by a few broad chests, the big dog let out a happy howl and turned over in the arms of the big sisters, revealing its white belly. It was so happy that it rolled its eyes. Just like that, in the midst of thousands of flowers, it turned its head and looked disdainfully at Huaishur in the distance, grinning mockingly. "Are you an idiot? Stinky brother from outside. Go away, okay? This is my special show." Huaishur was in a bad mood, looking at the familiar face. He couldn't believe it, couldn't understand, and felt as if he was struck by lightning. His popularity couldn't be compared to a dog. No one even noticed him. "Hey, does anyone know me? I'm Huaishur too. I can sign." The more he said, the sadder Huaishur felt. He felt like an outdated idol looking at a dog on the hot search headlines. What kind of F*** world was this? At the end of the square in the distance, on the marble base, there was a big golden dog sculpture, a vivid, silly expression, and that iconic wicked smile. Is there something wrong with the Imperial University? Chapter 8:28. After the free massage was over, the dog on the ground slowly got up, shook its body, and shook its fur. At the same time, it pushed away the fans who still refused to let go and lowered its head to pick up the takeout box next to Huaishur. When it turned around, a pair of icy blue eyes glanced at Huaishur and shook its head. It meant, "What are you waiting for? Come with me." Huaishur's expression twitched. He began to think about what would happen if he shot a dog that tried to attack the military officer of the Astronomical Society in Rome. It was so big that it couldn't be stewed in a pot. There were so many children in Australia who couldn't eat. Why didn't he sacrifice it? The dog seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. It snorted disdainfully, grinned, and revealed a mouthful of metal-colored fangs. It planned to fight with this stinky brother. Huaisha rolled his eyes. He didn't want to interact with it anymore. He inexplicably felt that a dog was easy to understand. There must be something wrong with him. It seems that you get along well with it. A curious voice came from beside him. Is this what it means by the same sex attracting? When Huaisha turned around in surprise, he saw the person who had appeared beside him without him knowing. She was looking at him with her head tilted. Her hair, which had been cut to her ears, reflected the sunlight and glowed faintly. It lit up that pair of quiet eyes. They were full of joy. She put her hands behind her back, smiled, and waited for his answer. After a long time, Huaisha finally came back to his senses and couldn't help but laugh. Long time no see, Fu Yi. Hasn't it only been a few months? Fu Yi reached out and took the takeout box from the dog's mouth. She looked at him. Have you had lunch? Not yet. Then let's go together. She nodded. I just ordered ham pizza, which has been very popular recently. You must try it when you come to Rome. It was as if she had known in advance that he was coming. She took out a lunch for two from the box. It was steaming hot and had just come out of the oven. There was also a whole serving of heavyweight roasted beef leg. There was no salt, and it was still bloody. The dog opened its mouth and picked it up, wagging its tail as it ran away. It seems like it has a girlfriend recently. It must be eager to show off. Just leave it be. Seeing it run away, Fu Yi lowered her head and laid out the tablecloth. I've been waiting for a long time to get this seat. This is the place with the best scenery in the Empire University. Huaisha sat on a stone bench and looked around. At the edge of the quiet lake was a lush forest. The winding path extended into the distance, and he could faintly see the auditorium and the bell tower in the distance. She didn't expect there to be such a beautiful place in Imperial University. In the ever-changing world, the city of Rome seemed to be stuck in the past and had never adapted to the changes of the times. When one went deep into the tranquility, it gave one a sense of tranquility and relaxation. Fu Yi had clearly ordered takeout, but she didn't eat much herself. She watched the way he ate, and that kind of happy smile always made Huaisha a little uneasy. What's wrong? He asked. Finished? Yes, more or less. Huaisha nodded. Then, here comes the important part. She reached out her hand and blinked, not hiding her expectation. Did you bring a gift? Huaisha's face twitched. He touched his satchel and took out a box. Finally, he felt guilty. I was in a hurry this time, so I only brought this. It's okay. Take it out and let me see. Fu raised her eyebrows and happily took the box. She opened it and saw another box inside. After the box was opened, it was another box. Her expression stiffened. She raised her head and said angrily, Are you playing with me? Isn't this too grand? Huaisha shrugged with a dry smile and moved back a little. This is the last layer. Open it and see. I specially chose it for you. The innermost paper box was opened. After crossing thousands of miles, the specialty from Donbua finally appeared in Imperial University of Rome and was displayed in front of Fu Yi. It was as thick as a wrist and heavy, a metal rod. Fu Yi's smile twitched and gradually became dangerous. What is this? It's a new product that I took from the laboratory before I left. You can think of it as a new type of alloy. Its hardness and toughness are much better than similar products outside. It also has the characteristics of origin substances and can repair itself. Even if there is a crack, just pour some iron powder on it, and it will heal after a period of time. Fu Yi sighed. She raised her hand to interrupt him and asked bluntly, "So, what is this thing used for? To blow your dog's head off?" A teeth-grinding rod. Sure shrunk his neck and explained, "Didn't you always complain about dogs randomly biting things? This can at least last for a few months." There was nothing he could do. He had left in too much of a hurry. He had originally planned to wait a little longer and prepare something better for Fu Yi's birthday. Now that he had suddenly arrived in Rome, he had no time to prepare at all. He also didn't want to go to a local specialty store and buy something to fool her. After thinking about it, only the products that he had participated in the research and production of were barely presentable. Origin substance mixed crystal alloy teeth-grinding rod. This was probably the toughest teeth-grinding rod in the world, right? Fu Yi lowered her head to look at the metal rod in her hand, then looked at Weisher's face. She tried very hard to resist the urge to stuff this thing into his mouth. "This really is useful." She rubbed her throbbing forehead and casually placed this thing to the side. "You're a district head now. Can't you give me something to add to the atmosphere? I saw it on the news. The king of Donbua is so powerful, but in reality, it's completely different from what the news says." Weisher shook his head and couldn't help but feel helpless. "Some of the news even made me blush when I saw it. It was completely overblown. I didn't even know I was that powerful. But I feel like you're at least more powerful than what the news says." Fu Yi thought for a moment, then said seriously, "More powerful than what those people think." When she said this, Fu Yi's expression became serious and happy. It was as if she believed from the bottom of her heart that everything he had created had irreplaceable value. Weisher felt even more embarrassed. "Okay, don't sit here. Let's go." She got up and extended her hand to invite him. "It's rare for you to come here. Let me show you around the school. After all, you're so famous. I'll be very proud too." "Ha! Could it be that I'm famous here?" "Of course, you have a lot of fans." Fu Yi nodded and couldn't help but glance at the husky playing in the lake in the distance. Her expression suddenly became subtle. The candidate for the mascot of the University of Rome. Weisher. He was so popular. To Weisher's surprise, the trip to the University of Rome was much calmer and more peaceful than he had imagined. There was nothing to disturb, and no untactful people came to interrupt. It was as if all the unpleasant scenes had been blocked. All that was left was a lazy time. Under the warm afternoon sun, they walked slowly along the path in the spacious school. Fu Yi introduced the areas and places here to Weisher. They chatted casually, as if they were digesting food after a meal. "To the moon?" Fu Yi exclaimed. "That's amazing. It's not a good place." Weisher sighed. "It's troublesome to come and go. There isn't even a bus. It's really not a good place to travel. After all, it's space." Fu Yi walked in front with her, hands behind her back. Her footsteps were light. Earlier, the school had an application for the Lunar Research Base. I wanted to go, but I didn't apply. I was rejected at the first stage. I'm afraid that my major is too obscure. It's not suitable. I remember that you are in social psychology." Weisher asked doubtfully. "Psychology is meaningless to go to the lunar laboratory. What were you thinking at the time? Why did you apply for this?" Fu Yi turned back and glanced at him as if she was angry. She told him, "Of course it's easy. That's really not your style." Weisher never thought that a person like Fu Yi, who paid attention to results and efficiency, would apply for an illusory major like psychology. Management and economics were where her interests lay. He couldn't imagine Fu Yi being a caring sister and counseling patients. Maybe she would be so angry that she would hit patients who didn't follow the doctor's instructions. Correction, it's not psychology or sociology. Fu emphasized again. It's Jungian theory, thank you. Something like that. Why sure, a layman didn't know much. Jung wasn't that the historical researcher of sociology and psychology, due to its special nature of not being able to be verified and replicated, it couldn't even be compiled and classified as a scholar. It didn't seem like the future was bright. If you think it's something like that, then it's something like that. Fu shook her head and gave up explaining the importance and practical use of Jung's theory to this guy who knew nothing about cultural subjects other than art, as well as the important role of archetype theory in the Silver Ocean. This kind of restricted major, which the Continuing Institute and Imperial University were in opposition to, didn't exist in the outside world from the beginning. It was natural that others didn't understand, but in the end, they were just students. Compared to those truly glorious things, those that truly turned the world around, it was not worth mentioning. There was nothing to show off. Along the way, it seemed that Fu was quite popular here. There were often people who greeted her warmly and kindly. Some people would also rub two dogs running around in front of them and give them a hot dog or grilled sausage. Because they're running for mascot, recently, many fans are actively canvassing for it. Fu explained. According to this trend, it might be the official mascot of Imperial University next year. By the way, the gap between second place and third place was about as big as the gap between third and 10th place added together. Huaisher would definitely debut at Imperial University. Huaisher's eyes twitched when he heard this. Can't you change its name? I want to change it too, but it won't recognize other names. Fu shrugged. It seems to like this name. If you don't believe me, you can try calling it. Isn't it a bit too much to let people call their own names to dogs? I think people who are so serious about dogs should also reflect on themselves. Fu looked over with a faint smile. Huaisher didn't know why, but he suddenly had nothing to say. There was only silence. A soft wind blew from afar. Scattered sunlight fell through the gaps in the shade, shining on her cheeks and illuminating her smile, as if waiting for him to say something. But soon, the low sound of a bell rang from afar. It announced the end of leisure. When turning a quiet corner, Huaisher saw the two people waiting at the end of the road. Marcus and an old teacher in a robe seemed to be having a conversation. After noticing the arrival of the two, they stopped. They waited quietly. Huaisher sighed unhappily. Fu seemed to understand and looked over. Is the lunch break over? Yes. He could sense the gazes from afar, quietly staring at the intruder on the campus, constantly reminding him of his identity. Sorry, he said, I probably have to go. It's okay. Fu thought for a moment and smiled indifferently. Business is more important. Just remember to bring me some letters from the moon. After saying that, she emphasized again, seriously, I will always be watching you. Don't forget. Don't worry, no problem. Huaisher patted his chest and promised. So she smiled, stood under the shade of the tree, nodded, and said goodbye. Then, I wish you a safe journey. Okay, goodbye. Huaisher waved his hand, picked up his backpack, and waved goodbye to her. After walking for a long time, he looked back and saw that she was still standing there, watching him leave. It made him feel lost. He walked out of the school gate, feeling a little melancholy and absent-minded. It seemed that he had neglected something and left something behind. But he thought for a long time, but he couldn't remember what he had forgotten. He could only look back and take one last look at the Empire University behind him. It wasn't until he was sure that the familiar figure could no longer be seen that he sighed softly and left with the rope. Chapter 8:29. Under the shade of the tree, the old woman who had just spoken to Marcus slowly retracted her gaze. She looked at the student beside her. The student was also looking at her with a curious expression, as if he didn't know what had happened, until she took the initiative to ask, "Fu, I just discovered that there's an abnormality in the projection of the Silver Sea in Imperial University. Do you have any clues?" "Is there?" Fu, he blinked innocently. "I didn't notice, teacher." The old professor was still smiling. "If you trace it back, you can find traces." "All right." The girl sighed. "I just cut the line and ordered a pizza. There's no need to be so alarmed, right? Just ordered a pizza." The old professor looked in the direction where Huaishur had left with a faint smile. The surveillance cameras that were projected from afar were still maintained and did not relax in the slightest. Look, even the people from the Directorate of Defense were frightened. They thought that an old woman like me was up to something again. "Sorry, teacher." "It's nothing. These are still within my authority. Besides, I just ordered a pizza, right?" The old man looked at her deeply. "This is not a big deal, Fu, but as a teacher, I don't want you to squander your talent so easily. Any operation of the Silver Sea needs to be considered and weighed repeatedly. If it weren't for the unshakable determination of Pompey's destruction and the responsibility to bear the worst consequences, it would be impossible to touch the authority of this ruler. All careless interference will have unpredictable consequences. You should keep this in mind." "I promise." Fu nodded and answered seriously. It was like the guarantee of every good student, reassuring. "Then don't do it again." The old woman raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Invisible ripples spread from her fingertips, causing the faint fog that shrouded Imperial University to silently dissipate. There were no more traces of operation. "Let's go, child. The afternoon class is about to begin." She glanced at the student behind her. "What I'm going to teach you today is the analysis of the Throne Angel's prototype." As the bell in the distance dissipated, a new class began. "I'm very sorry to interrupt your meeting with your friend." On the border express to the launch site, Marcus finally explained to Huaishur, who had a long face. "But the visitors of the Preservation Institute have been urging us, and we can't do anything." "Visitors?" Huaishur subconsciously glanced at the wristwatch on his wrist. He still had a destruction elemental derivative in his pocket. It was indeed inappropriate for him to wander around Imperial University. Donbua had been so comfortable that he could go wherever he wanted to go that he had forgotten about it. Unexpectedly, Marcus added, "After all, Miss Fuyi's identity is sensitive." Huaishur frowned as he realized that things were not as simple as they seemed. Whose identity are you calling sensitive?" "Ahem, Madame Fu Yi is an important person under the protection of the Bureau. Strictly speaking, she can't meet with someone like you who is contaminated with the elemental destruction. After all, it involves the protection of an important person." "Wait a minute." Huaishur raised his hand. "Can you start from the beginning? What important person under protection?" Marcus' expression stiffened. He adjusted his glasses and looked to the side. "I can speak slowly, but can you tell your pet to stop eating? After all, if it continues eating, the carriage will be gone soon." "What the hell?" Huaishur was stunned. He waved the rope in his hand angrily. "Where did my pet come from? F***CK, what the hell is this?" It was only now that he realized that he had been holding onto half of the rope all the way from Imperial University to the Border Express. And then, on the other end of the rope, was a dog. A huge husky. It was as if it had been blocked in a blind spot. It was only now that Huaishur realized. No, it should be said that he finally noticed that the dog was about to eat all the chairs behind them. Where did this dog come from? Huaishur was shocked. She raised her leg to kick the dog, but the dog was not to be outdone. It pounced on her like a tiger and bit her hand. Huaisher was not a pushover. He decisively dug the dog's heart into its stomach. The dog reciprocated. It lowered its head and bit Huaisher's wrist, refusing to let go. It almost bit through his metallized right hand. Huaisher was furious. He pulled out Lord of the Flies and was about to stuff it into the dog's mouth. Unexpectedly, the dog opened its mouth wide and aimed its throat at Huaisher. And then, Hatue! A stream of lava instantly gushed out, brushing past Huaisher's hair and landing on the carriage. It actually burned through the cabin. This was a F** king weapon of mass destruction. How did it get through customs? Wait, I seem to be the one who brought it here. Huaisher's mind went blank. Only then did he remember that when he passed through customs, the inspector gave Huaisher a stamp, stroked his dog's head, and praised him. Sir, your dog is really good. The dog's clearance permit was still nailed to his passport. Thinking of this, Huaisher's legs trembled. In other words, he had to be responsible for all the damage caused by this dog. Suddenly, a term that contained both topography and plants appeared in his mind 100,000 times. Why the F***ck did he bring this dog here from Imperial University? Seeing the dog open its mouth again, Huaisher's face suddenly changed. He rushed up and closed the dog's mouth, pinching it tightly and pressing it under its butt. On the opposite side, Marcus, who had witnessed this dragon and dog fight, was dumbfounded. He had never seen a person fight so fiercely with a dog. He could abuse a small animal in such a majestic manner. He almost wanted to clap his hands. This was the Prince of Paradise. He loved it. This is a misunderstanding. Huaisher emphasized seriously. This dog is not mine, really? I understand. Marcus promised. I will keep it a secret, definitely. You have to believe in my professionalism. With this stupid dog interrupting, Huaisher didn't know how to ask about Fu Yi's situation. But looking at the stupid dog beside him that he had unknowingly brought from Imperial University to the train, he seemed to understand something. Could it be that Fu Yi's talent in the Night of the Witch could still be used outside? A psychic manipulator? She could even influence him unknowingly? Wasn't this a bit too much of a bug? For a moment, Huaisher's mind went blank. Only a lot of discordant words such as editor, X-system, magician, and so on jumped out uncontrollably. What kind of operation is this? He asked quietly in the Book of Destiny. Isn't this normal? Tangi asked in puzzlement. After all, it's the final masterpiece completed by that child, Chassel. It's not strange for her to have this little ability, right? Huaisher was numb. He was stunned for a long time, in disbelief. Are you talking about a dog or a human? Aren't humans and dogs the same? Tangi replied lazily, to be honest, the dog is a byproduct for her. This is all thanks to you. Me? Huaisher's eyes widened. What does this have to do with me? As an experimental subject, you are the winner of the Night of the Witch that ushered in the dawn. Without your help, Chassel couldn't have completed her work. Tangi said, don't you understand what her final creation was? It wasn't Bichimo's, nor was it the elemental transformation of the beast of eternal life and the rancher, but the cycle of that world itself. The consciousnesses of all the species gathered and formed a miniature silver sea in hell, a complete sandbox of reality. It has everything that the silver sea has. In other words, anything that works inside will also work outside. Even if the power inside couldn't be brought out, the experience, comprehension, and feelings were things that couldn't be forgotten after experiencing them once. Putting aside the fact that you're having fun all the way here, have you forgotten about your teammates' gains? But she didn't become a sublimator. Yes. Tangi asked seriously, isn't this the most precious thing? For the Silver Sea, all sublimators are unfilial children who want to run away from home after achieving a little. Obedient children like Fu Yi, who willingly stayed behind are few and far between. After losing the insignificant chance of ascension, her connection with the Silver Sea increased instead. And after having the experience of the convergence of endless consciousness and the experience of personally driving the operation of the unified consciousness, she is already one of the people in the world with the closest connection to the Silver Sea. Chachel single-handedly nurtured her into his most outstanding work, pouring his last bit of care into her, hoping that she would be able to comprehend something from the confusion of life. From the moment the Night of the Witch ended, her resume was uploaded to a higher level of power through the decision-making room, and she became a key target of protection. Her value is even higher than that of Yu Dongri, who has a complete resonance physique. How can a sublimator be compared to her? Indeed, she didn't have the talent to create, nor did she have the aptitude to destroy. This ability would only reveal its true value when it was used to maintain things. The original engravers of the Silencer's stone tablet had already taken her into their attention and began a long period of observation and waiting. They hoped that one day she would be able to grow enough to take over the heavy responsibility from her ancestors. She would become the guardian of the Silver Sea. Group meme shielding, super wide area consciousness interference, sealing of hell's knowledge, and even guiding the human subconscious through the Silver Sea, she would establish common sense in short order and maintain the operation of the present society to ensure the stability of the Silver Sea. She had the potential, the ability, and even the valuable internship experience. The only thing she lacked was the education to guide this power out. Huaisher listened and didn't react for a long time. He really couldn't understand. Why was such an aptitude so precious, but someone would use it to stuff me with a dog? He pulled the dog's face in front of him, with both hands pulling the corners of its mouth and scrutinizing its sharp metal fangs. His expression twitched. The girl's laughter before she left rang in his ears again. "I will always pay attention to you," she said. "Don't forget." Thus, Huaisher came to a realization. He lowered his head and scrutinized the pair of ice-blue evil eyes, and his expression twitched. This was more than just paying attention. She might as well put a pair of eyes beside him. Was there such an advanced thing? But after he held the silly dog's head and scrutinized it for a long time, he couldn't see anything special about it, nor could he find any connection with Fu Yi. Huaisher thought about it seriously for a moment, then opened her mouth and asked tentatively, "What's the matter?" "Hello. Are you there?" Chapter 830. "Hello. Are you there?" The dog's answer was, "No, Hetue." It turned out that not only was there no one inside, but he was also sprayed by the dog's lava and almost disfigured. In anger, Huaisher simply tied up the dog's mouth several times. He really didn't understand where this thing learned from. Fortunately, the dog didn't cause any trouble for Huaisher other than chewing on iron objects. The only inconvenience was that it seemed to have made up its mind to be bound to him and never leave more than 3 steps away. Even when Huaisher went to the toilet, it would cling to the cubicle and look down. A pair of majestic dog eyes witnessed Huaisher's embarrassing appearance. Huaisher was so angry that he simply put an iron eye mask on it and welded it to death. By the time Huaisher got off the express train from the border, the entire carriage was almost completely eaten up by this thing. Huaisher stood at the door. She wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, he couldn't hold back the hope in his heart and asked Marcus, "Brother, can your post office reimburse me?" Then it was Marcus' turn to have a wonderful expression. "Reimbursement? Do we have to reimburse this thing too? Moreover, is this considered travel expenses or hospitality expenses?" But looking at Huaishi's eyes full of expectation, he was stunned for a long time and didn't know how to refuse. His expression twitched, and he could only nod with difficulty. I will try my best." Perhaps it was this mysterious setting that scared the higher-ups of the Mercury organization. After experiencing it firsthand, they no longer dared to send Huaishi by plane. On the road to the Pompeii space base, there was only one broken Jeep that paid for its own fuel. It was a convertible. Along the way, it ate a mouthful of dust and dirt. When they reached the gate of the base, the people and dogs were covered in dust, like refugees fleeing from a famine. Marcus, who was in charge of driving, was relieved. For the first time, the experienced Roman agent felt how difficult an escort mission was. The difficult part was not to protect the target, but to protect oneself next to the target. At 2 o'clock in the morning, in the dead silent wilderness, the base was still brightly lit and people were coming and going. Marcus stopped the car and handed over the task of receiving Huaishi to the base's security chief. "Then my mission ends here. Next, you will undergo some basic physical tests." The head of security
Tomorrow
next
morning,
to him replied,
you can
with
board
a
the
serious
latest
expression,
Earth-Moon space
"Sir,
shuttle to Minerva
the Kaiser
space
3
station.
space shuttle
If you
has
have any
perfectly
requests,
carried out
I can
more than
relay
40
them to you."
transportation
Marcus
and construction
said,
missions without any accidents.
"I don't have that
Please
requirement."
believe in our professionalism.
Huaishi scratched his head
There are
and
absolutely
looked up
no
at the
mistakes.
launcher in the distance.
"All right, just
Then
one question.
It's none of my business.
He asked,
if it's
uncertainly,
gone after the 41st
this
time.
space shuttle of
I
yours,
believe in your
is it
professionalism.
safe? But you
It's
have to
not that
believe
it's
in my
unsafe.
professionalism
It's a
too."
very special kind.
Huaishi scratched
Marcus
his head
wanted to say something,
and felt
but
more
stopped on
and
second
more that
thought.
something was wrong. When he lowered his head and looked at the obedient dog next to him with an honest and harmless smile, he finally realized what was wrong. No, wait, when they reached the stratosphere, this thing would get hungry and start tearing down the house. What the F*** would he do then? Fu-Yi threw a friendly puppy over, directly raising the difficulty level of Huaishi's difficult task to the level of a nightmare. However, the group of people next to him didn't know the danger of this thing. When they passed by, they smiled and touched the dog's head, completely unaware that the thing they were touching was a weapon of mass destruction. It could only be said that the disguise was too perfect. Miraculously, the strict safety test for the amount of toxins per milliliter in the blood actually passed this thing. "Sir, your pet is quite healthy. It seems that it will have no problem accompanying you on this space trip." The doctor rubbed the dog's head and smiled. "Oh, what a cute little thing. May I ask what its name is?" Huaishi was expressionless and silent for a long time. "You can call it Huaichi vegetarian dog." "Kashimotoku?" The doctor was enlightened. "It sounds like an Ingzhou name." "Yeah, who said it wasn't?" Huaishi curled the dog's teeth and said indifferently, "This is probably a Shiba Inu." Shiba Inu isn't this color, right? It has a strange disease and lacks iron. Look, it's losing its color." Huaishi reached out and picked up the dog that had shrunk several times and was only as tall as his calf. He casually swung it twice. "It's weak and sickly. Maybe it will get heat stroke, sprain its ankle, get depressed, or get injured in space. At that time, it can be used as a reserve food to realize the value of its dog life." At an angle that the doctor couldn't see, the young Bichimos raised its head and stared at him with a pair of blue eyes, baring its teeth at him. "Stinky brother, go back and wait. If I don't tear down your house, I'll change my surname to yours. Ha ha, your relationship is really good." The doctor looked at them enviously. "You must be very good to it, right?" "Yeah, who said I wasn't?" Huaishi hugged the dog and replied with a smile, "You see, I like it very much." In his arms, the dog opened its mouth and suddenly bit his arm, biting it hard. Huaishi's smile twitched. He pinched the dog's head and hugged it even tighter. They became even more intimate. Such happy days would never end. The next day, early morning, Huaishi, who had only slept for 3 hours, got up, put on the spacesuit layer by layer, and put on the helmet. Even if it was compressed repeatedly with the most advanced technology in Rome, the spacesuit was still cumbersome. Its weight was like a full body of iron armor, making it extremely slow and difficult to move. Even the dog had a full body of it. Wearing this suit, Huaishi's skills were equivalent to being half crippled. Moreover, with 5 thick fingers, he might not even be able to hold a sword steadily. But there was nothing he could do if he didn't wear it. If something went wrong, he would die. He wasn't strong enough to reason with the universe's vacuum, let alone the terrifying low temperature and rays. He hadn't reached the 4th level and completed the complete transformation of his body into origin form. At most, he relied on the mountain ghost talent to last a bit longer than normal people. But before that, the pressure in his body would explode like a deep-sea fish rapidly rising to the surface. For ascenders, space was still a hopeless situation. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a lunar prison. Even today, it was still a place where the Astronomy Association imprisoned felons. Because of the huge threat to the world, they couldn't be kept, but because of their own talent or other value, they couldn't be killed. They couldn't be thrown into hell, and they couldn't be kept in the present world. Then they could only be thrown to the dark side of the moon, where the Earth couldn't be seen for tens of thousands of years, quietly waiting for the day when they could be used again as a tool. Huaishi had once discussed with AI Qing whether or not the general would be sent there. But in view of the general's cooperation during the arrest process and various considerations, he was only thrown into the trench prison and isolated under the pressure of the bottomless abyss. And there was more than just a prison on the moon. It was also full of large and small laboratories and research bases for all kinds of key research that was not suitable to be carried out in the present world and couldn't be placed in the border or hell. Now, basically every inch of the place had been filled with flags from the 5 permanent. Although it was true that the place belonged to all mankind, you had to be able to go up, right? Otherwise, what was the difference between the land on the moon and the profits of ordinary shareholders in the stock market? It was just something that existed in theory. Now, at this moment, just outside Pompeii City, on the volcano, the launch pad set up in the crater of the volcano was a countdown from the launch center. The surrounding heat was rapidly gathering, causing the solidified lava in the crater of the volcano to begin to melt again, bursting into a blazing light. As early as at the beginning of the design of the launch base, this volcano was included in the consideration. Everything was to effectively use the law of conversion of geothermal heat to save fuel for the first stage, making the launch process more convenient. Now, Huaishi was sitting in the back seat, watching the operations of the pilots in front of him. After he looked away, he stared at the broken dog next to him. He was supervising it so that it didn't rush up to take a bite of whatever was delicious on the spaceship. The bulkhead was so thin. If it was chewed through, everyone would be finished. On the chair specially prepared for transporting animals, the broken dog seemed to not understand what was happening at all. It bent down, raised its hind legs, and swung and rotated like a tornado, trying to scratch its itchy ears through the helmet. There was only the sound of a clapping sound echoing in the countdown. The moment the number 0 appeared, Huaishi's vision went black. He felt hundreds of his own weight being exerted on his body, almost embedded in the chair. With the loud sound of the jet, the terrifying acceleration began. Countless noises converged from all directions. The sound of the engine trembling, the sound of the fuel tumbling, the faint vibration when the heat-resistant tiles gradually cracked and burned red, and even the low sound of every piece of iron and screw bursting out. They converged in one place, turned into a tide, and passed into Weischer's hands through the protective suit. It made his perceptive eyes appear like invisible eyes, spreading out along with the touch of objects. He felt the billowing air waves when the air was ignited and the roaring sound of the hurricane. His consciousness was running on the steel, looking down, and he felt the earth was rapidly moving away. At that moment, Weischer opened his eyes. Through the complicated steel structure, he caught a glimpse of the blue sky in front of him, and even the original darkness of the universe behind him. Between the dusky heaven and earth, behind the thick layers of clouds, in the oppressive leaden darkness, a burning red light suddenly appeared, igniting the darkness. It wantonly stretched up, forward, and outlined a blazing trail. It was as if it wanted to ignite all of this. It tore apart all blockades, climbed high, and moved between heaven and earth. It was moving toward outer space with the body of a human. He drove steel, broke through the kingdom that once belonged to the gods, and left everything on earth behind. He was flying. Chapter 8:31. The stars shone, but the sun could not be seen. This world seemed to be eternally quiet. The earth was shaking. Countless dust particles were lifted up silently, reflecting the light of the fire as they danced silently in the darkness. Above the huge building, white fog formed by countless air leaks quickly spewed out and flew into the vacuum, causing a terrible cold to enter the room. They exchanged what they needed. They looked like big-headed dolls running on the barren land. Those figures were shrouded in bulky gray spacesuits. They held specially modified guns and weapons in their hands and pulled the trigger at the guards behind the crack. In the low-gravity vacuum, they nimbly jumped on the ground, silently bringing death to the enemy and silently welcoming their own death. Broken sounds and shouts could be heard. At the moment when the physical signs of death were confirmed, flames would engulf everything from the inside out. Eventually, even the spacesuits would be degraded under alchemy and melted into the dust. Only a wisp of flying ash was left. In the fierce exchange of fire, the alarms inside the lunar prison rang one after another. The first thing the security director did was to press the red button in front of him, causing the 3 dangerous areas, a 1B1C1 to close the gates, and forcibly sealing the prisoners and guards inside together with an order that could not be disobeyed. The identities of those prisoners were too sensitive, and the value they represented was too precious. They could not be killed, but they could not be allowed to leave. They could only be isolated in the most thorough way. Once the alarm was sounded, everything inside would instantly freeze into a piece of foam that spewed out. Before that, everyone would fall into a deep sleep, whether physically or spiritually. Everything would be stagnant. Under low-temperature sleep, their bodies could last for more than 72 hours. The frozen foam would maintain a hardness greater than steel and connect with the entire bottom layer of the prison. Unless the entire lunar prison was blown up, no one would be able to take anything from it. The only liquid that could dissolve this substance was kept in the present world in London. The moment the button was pressed, the search and rescue team would begin to prepare to set off. If they could not arrive in 72 hours, all the prisoners and staff inside would face death. But even if the value was buried in the eternal cold soil of the lunar surface, no one would be allowed to take it away. But now, the foam that spewed out was not able to cover everything. In the main control room, the head of security raised his eyes, and saw that the pale foam in the B1 layer was rapidly dissolving. In the end, only white ash was left. Instead, they sealed off the entrance and cut off all reinforcements. In the underground detention facility, an endless stream of invaders appeared in front of the camera and killed all who stood in their way. They were prepared for all kinds of defensive measures. This was a long-planned prison break. Ignoring the more precious targets on both sides, they stepped forward and walked straight to the edge of the corridor without any hesitation. He used the most violent method to break the external force field, and then skillfully used the myriad dissolving agent to melt the iron door in front of him. Let the prisoners, who are bound by layers, emerge from the darkness. Asterisk, 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 1-8770, the old man with thinning hair, was imprisoned in the restraints that made him look like a mental patient. He raised his head and grinned mockingly at the surveillance camera. Saliva dripped from the corners of his open lips, but his teeth were covered in a layer of crystal-like radiance. Faint symbols appeared. Without the attacker's help, the shackles on his body were easily removed. It was as if he was shaking off dust. He regained his freedom. Just like that, he casually walked out of the cage that had imprisoned him for 30 years. He stretched his back in satisfaction, turned around, and said something to the invader. Then he saw a pitch-black handgun being raised. It was aimed at his forehead. The old man was stunned for a moment. He could not see the attacker's expression behind the pitch-black mask, and he did not say anything. He just coldly pulled the trigger and broke the bowl of life, causing the scarlet blood in the skull to splash out. The old man fell to the ground in a daze. Until he died. His face was blank. Then, the leader of the attackers aimed the gun at the old man's head, heart, and other vital points, and pulled the trigger again and again, until the bullets were empty. He confirmed that the old man's remaining breath was cut off. The cursed bullets instantly contaminated all the source substances, causing the soul to shatter and decay. In the end, the attacker reloaded a new magazine, turned the muzzle, and aimed it at his subordinates. One by one, the traces of their movements were erased. In the end, he was the only one left. In front of the surveillance camera, he burned into a pile of black ash from the inside out. The attack ended in an instant. They did not think about taking the prisoner from inside, nor did they think about how to withdraw from inside. After erasing all traces, including themselves, only a tragic result was left. Before the internal guards were dispatched, everything was over. Just as Weisher arrived at the Mitra space station, in the outer layer of the lunar prison, the Alpha Zone, prisoner number B1-8771, the Grand Master Publius Augustus, stopped breathing, harming the 3 great blockades, violating 16 taboos of the Stone Cauldron Institution, committing hundreds of crimes, and causing the deaths of tens of thousands of people. Alchemist was suddenly met with death after struggling at death's door for 30 years. And on the space station thousands of miles above the ground, Weisher leaned in front of the window, looking down at the rising flames in the dark, and could not help but exclaim in admiration. "Wow, you people from the moon are really romantic. You even set off fireworks during the holidays?" 30 minutes ago, on the Mitra space station, the Earth-Moon Space Research Base in Rome, in the circular gravity simulation area, Weisher met the station master, a middle-aged scholar who did not smile much. As the host, he invited this rare visitor for dinner, the standard liquid food of the space station. In accordance with the commission of the Helios workshop, in an hour, we will send you to the ground station when we pass the area around the Kepler crater. After that, you will set off with the alchemists of the Stoneforge Institute. If you need any help, please do not hesitate to ask. As long as I have enough to eat and drink, Weisher sucked on the paste-like food in the bag and stared at the dark space and the moon that were constantly rotating outside the porthole. But I have a question that I don't understand. Was it always so troublesome to go to Helios before? Do we have to travel so far? No. It is also the first time for us to transport qualified people to Helios, the station master replied. In the past, it was the Helios that went directly to the present to receive passengers, but this time, for some reason, it did not approach the Earth-Moon system. Instead, through the previous contract with the Stoneforge Institute, the transportation work was transferred to the major lineages. As for the details, I'm not sure. You can ask the staff of the Stone Cauldron Society when you reach the moon. As far as I know, the person leading the team this time is Mr. Grand Master Garland. He should know more. You mean Garlandian? Huaisher's movements paused for a moment, somewhat unexpected. Grand Master Garland, the oldest and most influential alchemist in the present world, was a senior member of the Stoneforge Institute, and was also a pillar of the academic world. He deserved to be called the pinnacle of transformation studies in alchemy. Even Grand Master Mikhail was several generations behind him. Before Mikhail's teacher joined the institute, Mr. Garland was already a Grand Master. Because of his lofty status, alchemists respectfully called him Garland Ian. Almost all the existing alchemists had come into contact with and learned from this old man's theories and techniques. So far, no one had been able to reach the same height as him. This suddenly put a lot of pressure on Huaisher. To have such a famous person lead the team, the difficulty of Helios's commission this time was probably not ordinary. For a metal alchemist like Huaisher, who could only rely on his soul ability in addition to his power as a forger, he might not even be able to get in line to carry a bag next to Garland Ian. For a moment, he felt a headache coming on. With such a big shot around, it would not be good to fish in troubled waters. Huaisher pinched his chin and fell into deep thought. He was already thinking about the reflection crystals on Helios. If there was really no other way, he was afraid that he could only do what Russell said, and do it. They were all teachers from the Ivory Tower. Could it be that Russell could touch the crystals on your car, but Paige, could not? Just as he was contemplating his big plan of breaking the law, he heard a disturbance in the rotating gravity cabin. Countless people rushed out from the corners, valiant and high-spirited. A high-pitched voice sounded. It was as if someone had blown a heavy horn in space. There was the sound of drums from the broadcast. Everyone was roaring excitedly. Huaisher looked up and was dumbfounded. Right in front of him, the station master had already taken off his cumbersome jacket and trousers and opened his arms. The staff members rushed up and surrounded him. Their hands didn't stop moving as they helped him put on a ring armor, a battle skirt, a bright red helmet, a cape, a scepter, and a sword. When the group of people dispersed, the gentle and serious scholar in front of Huaisher had turned into a majestic captain with angry eyes. "What are you doing?" Huaisher subconsciously leaned back strategically, looked around, and widened his eyes. "The Romans want to kill me." Immediately after, the station master said, "Sorry, excuse me for a moment." He raised the sword in his hand and said fiercely, "Rome needs me. The people need me." Immediately, hundreds of astronauts dressed as Roman soldiers raised their hands and roared enthusiastically. It was as if they were going to war. No, that excited look. It was as if they were celebrating a festival. In the monitoring room, in front of the observation system, the navigator shouted at the top of his voice, "The enemy is 400 kilometers away. 350 kilometers. Everyone, get ready." Therefore, in an instant, the crowd rushed to the edge of the circular gravity simulator and stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window-facing space. They roared at the shining steel star in the distance. Even if the vacuum could not transmit sound. Just opposite Mitra Space Station, in the distant darkness, another huge square space station slowly appeared with the American flag. The rapidly enlarged image was projected on the glass as if it was quickly zooming in. Just behind the armor plate that slowly opened, there was also a floor-to-ceiling window. Countless figures appeared under the light. Everyone held their breath as their faces turned red. The war was about to begin. In the silence, Weisher was stunned as he picked up the watermelon jelly in the plastic bag. Melon! What is this? Chapter 832. At this moment, on the moon, in the vast space, as the orbits overlapped, the two space stations, Mitra and Liberty Goddess, reunited in this barren void after half a year. Even at their closest, but the distance was more than 200 in this dormitory, where everyone generally squeezed into 20 people gradually moved they had closer, to line up to use the toilet. Everyone's expression and was the excited, had to be as recycled. If they were about to welcome. If you didn't know how to play, indeed, you would have driven yourself crazy by looking at a pile of when instruments the scene behind the and data every day projected in front it was of just seeking eyes. Joy. He was in the midst of bitterness. Hundreds there was no of burly men drink, had their no faces smeared and with no paint. Porn. Their hair was
Hundreds
either
of people
tied
were
up
living
or
in a
shaved.
metal box.
Their upper
There was
bodies
an
were naked,
endless amount of
revealing
work
countless
and data,
fierce paint
even
and
the
body
otaku
hair.
who was
They held
unwilling to
mop
go out
sticks or
would
spears
not
and
be
battle
able to take
axes
it.
that were
Even the
temporarily
development of
modified
hell
from steel
was better
Their eyes
than
were
this job.
wide open as
At
they
the very
roared at
least,
the Romans
he could
in
go
the
out.
opposite space
If
station.
they went
Under
out
the
in this
lead of the
place,
station,
they
head
would
at the
die
front.
if they ran
the
out of
electrical
oxygen.
signal from
The
space
void of the
transmitted
universe
the
was
vast
too vast
and mighty voice,
even if it was
without
just a
reservation.
round trip between
the
the
leader
Earth-Moon
at the
system.
front even held
It
a
was
chicken
still
in his
long enough to
hand
make one
and chopped
feel
it on
numb.
the spot.
In
He
comparison,
smeared the chicken's
everyone
blood
was
on
just
his
an
face
ant curled
and
up in a
shouted
box.
loudly at the Romans.
They didn't immerse
in the
themselves
opposite
in
space station.
sadness for too
Then,
long.
The
Just as the
100-man
space
phalanx
station was
of
about
Roman
to turn
infantry
over the dark
also
side
began
of the
to
moon
demonstrate
in the
and
projection from the
retaliate.
outside world.
They shouted in
Everyone
unison,
saw that at
Roman
the end of the moon's
Caesar.
surface, on
Then
the eternally
they raised
pale
their
land,
heads
a
and
slender
sang a
beam of
military
light
song.
suddenly
For
rose.
a moment,
It was
the
like
voices
a sharp
from each
iron
other
needle
echoed
piercing from
in
the
the inside
communication
out,
between
piercing
the
the
two
moon's
sides,
shell and pointing to the
separated by a
sea.
distance
What's
of
that?
200 kilometers.
Weisher scratched
the
his
staff
head
of the two
and took a
scientific
look.
observation space
Fireworks
stations greeted
celebrating
the
on
long-awaited
the moon.
Voyagers. Until
That's
a
a level
short
2
3
emergency
minutes
alert,
passed,
sir.
in an
The
instant,
station chief's
the two
expression
sides
became
crossed
serious.
each other in
Something
orbit.
might have
At the
happened
last
at the prison.
moment, the station
It's
heads of
reminding
both
everyone
sides
to be
waved
on
goodbye
guard against
and agreed to meet
jailbreakers.
again in half a year.
Jailbreak,
Then,
Weisher
the soldiers
was
who
stunned
were
for a
so
long time.
powerful just
It
now
was
began
hard
to
to
busy
imagine.
cleaning up the trash
In this place,
and things that
buried
fell on the
deep
ground
under
in
the
the
moon,
cabin, where one would
Weisher was
suffocate to
stunned the
death
whole time.
once the
He
oxygen was
slurped
cut off.
the already
There was
empty
actually someone who
watermelon
could
jelly
escape
in his mouth.
This was not a place
I'm
where
sorry
one
for
could
making you
just
laugh.
grab a set of protective
We rarely
clothing
see outsiders
and run away
when we're traveling
ignoring
in
the
space.
heavy internal
Sometimes
defense.
when we
Just
encounter
the harsh
something,
situation on
we
the
get
outside was
overly
enough
excited.
to make any jailbreakers
The station
feel
head took off
despair.
his helmet and
The
proudly
uninhabited
explained
area
to
of
Weisher,
thousands of
but those
kilometers
Americans
was enough
lost
to
again.
trap all
How can that
jailbreakers.
kind of cosplay compare to
Hypothermia,
our real thing?
death, the champion of
Suffocation,
this year's
death,
Space Warrior
starvation
Cup will be
death,
ours, and the nearest supply
Amazing.
station was
You still have a
2,100
competition.
kilometers away.
That's right.
The mathematicians
It's an annual
used
competition
precise
sponsored by
calculations to
Egypt's
ensure
vast space
the
station.
monthly supply,
And the award
down
is
to
given by
every
the
mouthful
International
of
Space
starch
Council
and every
It's
screw.
an honor for
Since the
every
construction of the
astronaut.
lunar prison.
Don't you think
a
it's a
total
bit
of
too
4
much to
level
ask
5
for a
ascendants
trophy
had served
when
their
you're playing a
sentences
space
there?
role?
There were
Weisher
also
could
countless
only
scholars
clap
and
in
alchemists
admiration after
and
hearing
even
this.
creators
You guys
and
still know how to
grandmasters.
play.
Not a single person was able to leave. In the above special cases, no one even waited until the day they were released. Mr. Weisher, I'm afraid your journey will be affected. After the station chief put down the communicator, he
Our
brought
spacecraft
bad news.
have a mission.
And
Now,
all
I'm afraid
takeoffs
it will
on
be
the moon
difficult to send you
require
down
the
without
approval of the
permission.
management committee.
We
We have confirmed from the Kepler Valley base that all their vehicles must take off within 2 hours. Otherwise, they will have to stay and cooperate with the investigation. He paused and looked at him sympathetically. In other words, if we wait for the committee to approve our landing and takeoff, you may not be able to catch up with the Stoneware Institution's ship. Then what should I do? Weisher was dumbfounded. He lowered his head and looked at his phone. The scheduled itinerary was stuck. There were still 2 hours. It should have been enough time for Weisher to land, pass the verification, and meet up with the Stoneware Institution's people to leave calmly. This was simply an unexpected disaster. Someone had escaped from the dark side prison. With a flap of his little wings, all the takeoffs and landings on the moon were disrupted. Kepler Base's ship was allowed to take off because the Stoneware Institution's reputation was big enough. Moreover, they were almost on the other side of the moon. The jailbreakers would not be able to cross such a long distance in a short time. That's the problem. The station chief's expression became awkward. Although the spacecraft can't take off and land, we have an airdrop chamber for drones to sample, he coughed dryly, and said apologetically, if you don't mind, you can actually make do with it. This suggestion was actually not very reliable. If Weisher was not a famous ascendant, he probably would not have even mentioned it. This was no different from putting a person into a torpedo and launching it. It was something that could not be returned after being thrown out. The airdrop chamber for drones was originally a one-time consumable. It was used to detect large meteorites, as well as a tool for rock sampling and analysis.
It still carried a landing device and buffer equipment to ensure the drone's integrity, but it would not have the fuel to escape the moon's gravity and fly back. Otherwise, it would not be able to bypass the moon's current takeoff control. In addition, the only vehicle that could transport people in the Minerva space station was the space shuttle used for scheduled transportation and resupply. Who knew how long the moon's flight control would be maintained? Space travel was not a walk in the park. If that thing was not allowed to take off after landing, the Minerva space station's operations would be affected. In the worst-case scenario, they might even run out of food. Therefore, when the station chief was faced with a choice between letting down the crew or letting down Huaishur, he could only choose between letting down his little brother, who was hitching a ride. As for Huaishur, after carefully understanding the situation, she also felt that this was a good idea. This airdrop chamber of yours. Huaishur rubbed his chin and asked tentatively, "Is it safe?" The airdrop chamber is the same configuration as the Minerva space station's escape capsule. It's even more spacious and safe. After all, even a consumable drone is much more precious than a human body. Sounds like it can be used. Huaishur immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Just don't blow it up halfway. Isn't it just an unlicensed vehicle? It's not like I haven't been in one before. He didn't even wear a seatbelt on Raymond's truck. It was fine as long as it could send him down. It was better than standing here and waiting for the bus to arrive. After receiving Huaishur's approval, the station chief immediately breathed a sigh of relief, but he also felt more guilty. 15 minutes later, the outer layer worked overtime. On the launch platform of the airdrop chamber, Huaishur saw the prepared vehicle and all the tools prepared for him. It included 3 layers of impact protection, enough compressed food to last more than 2 days, and enough water to last a week. When necessary, it could be used as a consumable for oxygen production. A small cushioning device nested inside the airdrop chamber. A specially modified pistol that could be used in a vacuum. A magazine of alchemy bullets. A radio station for emergency communications, a human source supply, a medical kit, and even a maintenance box filled with a set of maintenance tools. There was even a set of eye-catching bright red spacesuits for the search and rescue team to look for in case of an accident. There was also a liquid cushioning suit with the highest safety specifications. Even the dogs had a set. There's no need for so much. Huaishur looked at himself being wrapped into a ball and was dumbfounded. There's no way I can carry so many things. If you can't carry them, just leave them where they are. Isn't littering prohibited on the moon? It's fine. We'll pay for the subsequent recovery and cleanup work, the station chief said straightforwardly. These are all necessary reserves. Seeing their serious and careful expressions, Huaishur even began to wonder if these people were more nervous than he was. The station chief seemed to see his doubts and asked, "Mr. Huaishur, this might be your first time working in outer space, right? As researchers, we don't have anything to guide sublimators, but if it's survival experience, there's still some room to speak." He said solemnly, "Let me give you a piece of advice. Here, you must be prepared for the worst. You must be 10 times more prepared. Waste has never been a problem. The problem is that you don't even have the chance to waste. This is a desperate situation where you can't survive without your tools," he said to the man in front of him. He told the man in front of him, "Under any circumstances, you must be able to ensure that you can survive until the rescue team arrives." Just like that, he tightened the belt on Huaishur's body and hung the pistol in the outer backpack, a place that was convenient to access at any time. After the 3rd inspection of the airdrop chamber, the station chief took a step back and waved goodbye to Huaishur. "I sincerely hope that we can meet again on your return journey." He said, "Goodbye, Mr. Huaishur." Along with the countdown, the airdrop chamber suddenly shook and slid outward along the orbit. Finally, it left the space station. under the acceleration of the ejection. It fell toward the eternal pale alien planet below. There was no friction from the atmosphere, no air resistance, no violent tremors, and no abnormalities. Only the gradual increase of gravity in the distance told Weischer that he was falling. It was at that moment that his vision went black, and he felt a chill. A premonition of death burst forth, because in the dark universe in the distance, an icy glow lit up. It was like a star was striking. Chapter 833. At the same time, an ear-piercing alarm sounded from Mitra space station. In the blink of an eye, the screen turned red. As the radio waves spread and reflected, the originally empty screen was suddenly filled with countless tiny dots of light. What is this? The station commander's eyes widened. Missiles? No, much smaller than missiles. The material analysis is out. Weight, iron, nickel, and silicon. The observer glanced at the report on the top right in disbelief. This is a meteorite, a small meteorite cluster. In that instant, the entire Mitra space station shook violently. The B4 solar array lost its signal. Then, the recirculation chamber's alarm sounded. Before that, the emergency evacuation program had already been activated. Countless people ran in a hurry. The station commander turned back, and the observer turned all his might and reported, "Force field, sir. Where's the force field generator?" The station master was silent of the airborne ejection for a moment before he closed his eyes with difficulty. Temporarily shut down. On his chest, the operator's face there was pale. A sacred emblem still warming of Mercury. Commander, she prayed that Weischer was safe just and 5 sound. Seconds. At that 5 moment, seconds. The 16-engine what would happen nozzles burst into flames and at the same time, pushing the Mercury space station towards what about the airborne chamber? More meteorite showers. Mitra's server had rushed into the orbit of the meteorite clusters under the surveillance of the cameras. It was no different from other meteorites. Shaking violently after being captured by the moon's gravity. Burst out. It was approaching the moon. The world was spinning. It was estimated that after one round, black, it would fall into the violent tremor. But the question was, as if someone had suddenly punched him before. That kind of only when it was 5 kilometers from within his body did it react. It was not an illusion, 5 kilometers, but a resonance from supreme, very far. When the premonition of reaction time in space. He even thought that the Romans wanted to blow him up. Mitra's space station was just at the edge of the resonance and supreme spread, and the airborne chamber was within his perception down, and he felt an endless stream. The server finished calculating on the pod. The airborne chamber was now blocking his eyes were flashing scarlet. His eyes were bleeding. It was as if he was floating in the dark space, being attacked by countless enemies. The station commander pulled at the communicator no need for and kept repeating to collide. Emergency, the accumulated energy from the long journey in space was enough to destroy everything with small meteorites. Even a meteorite the size of a station commander turned irreparable damage and looked at the communications manager. But what the F asterisk the manager shook his head. Weischer could not even bring himself interference during the descent. We can't do anything remotely. What was going on? In the violent tremor, all of a sudden, the entire circular space station was like during the journey. Leaf could it be that Mitra space station's luck was solar arrays fell off, but the production date of the pod was silently not too good in the dark vacuum. And the 8 characters were like the scales of an Ouroboros. How small was the probability of encountering under the scholar's control, SH, a transparent layer of repulsive force shielded the space station. It should be noted that more than causing dazzling light spots and ripples to burst out of the universe outside of Earth. That was the impact of even extend to tens or hundreds of increase our altitude. Did not have any matter. Too big of a target. In the vast void of the universe, an airborne pod encountered a group of meteorites. The probability was even more exaggerated than winning the lottery 10 times in a row. This was under the premise that no one could ever win the first prize in the sports lottery. But what was going on now? Thankfully, amidst the countless radio waves, he heard a vague voice from the space station. Please speak. Assist. Engine. Without caring about following the instruction manual, Weischer raised his hand and smashed the only button beside him. But it was useless. At the same time, the entire pod shook again. Weischer's blood instantly rushed to his head, and the pod cover above his head disappeared in an instant. It was as if a knife had cut open a tragic gap. Under the impact of another meteorite, the pod was severely damaged, and then the entire shuttle-shaped pod spun violently. The alarm of the operating program sounded again in the channel. It was as if a fighter jet had stalled. Huaishir did not know what professional terms to use, but the moment his heart sank to the bottom, he heard Tangi sigh. In an instant, hope was reignited. "Tangi, save me!" "Idiot, what's the use of calling me now?" Tangi became more and more helpless. "I don't know how to operate this thing." "Then why are you sighing?" "I'm just waiting to see when you'll remember." Tangi sighed softly. Huaishir was about to die from anxiety. "Remember what?" Tangi rolled her eyes. "Of course. Remember that Osiris's main control intelligence is in your trouser pocket." At that moment, Huaishir felt as if he had been granted amnesty. He frantically fumbled around the outermost saddlebag and pulled out the impatient Lord of the Flies. "Don't pull a dream. Give me a hand." "Hatue, scumbag." In the Book of Steel, Beelzebub spat. When he used it, he called it Little Sweetheart. When he didn't use it, he stuffed it into his trouser pocket. He even King cut off the Wi-Fi. Even so, Beelzebub did not have time to dawdle at this critical moment. The moment the Book of Steel appeared, it disintegrated on its own. Countless cables and plugs flew out from the pages of the book, piercing into every corner of the entire airdrop cabin. In less than a second, the entire system was under control. Then it frantically extracted Huaishir's origin substance and replenished it. After forcefully repairing and awakening the engine system, it spewed out blazing flames. Amidst the countless flying meteorites, the capsule, which was like a withered flower, suddenly shook. The engine started, and a huge thrust burst out of nowhere. It quickly pushed Huaishir towards the ground. However, under the impact of countless meteorites, the capsule's outer shell kept peeling off. Sparks flew as it spun violently. Even though it escaped from the front track under the attack of the aftershocks, it was still difficult to control its trajectory. In the end, it was too late. The conditions were limited. If this was a space shuttle, Beelzebub could drive it and drift among the meteorites. However, a capsule with limited fuel really did not have much room to display his skills. He could only barely maintain it. At that moment, Huaishir saw the moon's surface through the crack at the top. It was like an illusion, as if he saw ripples spreading in the sea. Deep waves appeared in the eternal silvery white. Then countless grayish-white motes rose into the air, pulled and gathered by an invisible force. In the end, it actually formed a huge lifelike palm. Its 5 fingers spread out as if it was wearing a ring. It aimed at the capsule from afar. The 5 fingers drew in the air, leaving a trace of origin substance. It was an alchemy array that instantly unfolded. In an instant, an invisible gravitational force burst out, pulling the capsule towards its palm. Meanwhile, rays of light flew out from its slightly spinning pinky. Against gravity, they flew into space, shattering the large meteorites that were rushing towards the capsule. Then, he guided the descending warehouse into the palm of his hand. Someone made a move. However, as the distance between the two got closer and closer, Huaishir did not even have time to breathe a sigh of relief before he saw a meteorite flying from the side hit the tip of its index finger, causing the finger to instantly twist and break. The capsule that fell into its palm actually leaked out. With a terrifying momentum, it swooped down and smashed towards the surface of the moon that had been silent since ancient times. A comet crashed into the earth. At the last moment, Beelzebub's pages violently flipped, causing Osiris's huge shadow to envelop the capsule that was riddled with holes. Countless illusory engine nozzles aimed at the ground in front of them. An illusory rainbow burst out. The remaining power of the Hell Destroyer only lasted for a moment. It cut off most of the inertia. Then, the capsule rolled and fell to the ground. It bounced violently, bursting into flames, shattering into pieces, scattering debris all over the ground. An orange-yellow cushion ball rolled out from inside. It was cut open, and the honeycomb-like inner layer was exposed. Finally, the sublimator in the red spacesuit slid out. He lay on the ground of the alien planet. Huaishur turned over with difficulty and lay among the flying moon dust. He saw the eternal darkness of space and the azure planet hanging under the sun. Amidst the alarm of the oxygen leak in the capsule, Huaishur could not help but want to lift his mask and smoke a cigarette to calm himself down. He was still alive, but someone wanted him dead. Why? Chapter 834. Don't panic. At this moment, Huaishur was lying on the moon, looking up at Earth and talking to himself. His head was buzzing, and his vision was dark. It might be internal bleeding, but it didn't matter. Let's make a conclusion first. You, Huaishur, male, 18.5 years old, a happy young man who was fishing and practicing in Danbua, suddenly received an invitation to go to the Helios workshop. Just like that, you went to Rome, met friends, took the dog to the sky, and came to the space station. Unfortunately, you encountered a prison break that hadn't happened in decades and needed to be forced to land. Then, you encountered a meteorite shower that hadn't happened in thousands of years. You almost smashed into the ground with the airborne capsule and became a pile of scrap metal. There was no doubt that this was definitely not a coincidence. Someone wants to kill you. Tanguy went straight to the point and said the conclusion for him. I think compared to a pure coincidence, this possibility is more convincing. Is there no other possibility? Huaishur asked. Think on the bright side. Maybe you're especially unlucky, right? Tanguy laughed. But when have you not accidentally stepped into someone's trap when you were unlucky? Huaishur raised his hand and slapped his round mask hard. He was full of grief and anger. In the realm, someone wanted to mess with him. In hell, someone wanted to mess with him. I'm already in the sky. Why is there still someone who wants to mess with me? For what? Huaishur wanted to hold his chin and think, but he couldn't touch it through the mask. This time, he didn't need Tanguy to come to a conclusion. There was no doubt that someone didn't want him to reach the Helios workshop. Someone wanted him to have an accident on the way. If it really didn't work, it didn't matter if he died. If Huaishur stayed at Mitra Space Station and waited for the Moon Management Committee's permission to take off and land, he might not have encountered these troubles. But once he left the space station, he immediately encountered the crisis of death. But why didn't he encounter any problems when Pompeii took off? If they wanted to kill him, it would have been more convenient, right? Even the slightest mishap during liftoff would cause Huaishur to die in the fuel explosion. Perhaps it was because they were still in the core of the reality realm at that time, so it was inconvenient to do anything? Or was it that the distance was too far, and it was beyond his reach? If that was the case, the person who wanted to kill him was most likely on the moon right now. He wasn't out of danger yet. And where's my dog? Huaishur finally remembered. He stood up abruptly and looked around at the barren ground. Please don't let anything happen to him. Otherwise, the puppy of friendship would be buried on the moon. Then he saw a dog get up from not far away and walk slowly towards the wreckage of the airborne capsule. He buried his head in the ground and rummaged through the broken frame. Huaishur didn't even have time to call it back. In the distance, a spark suddenly burst out from the wreckage of the airborne capsule, igniting the rapidly leaking oxygen. The blazing flames immediately rose, along with the air waves that dissipated in the vacuum. They blew in all directions. Huaishur's heart turned cold. It was over. The puppy of friendship was dead. Before he could put his hands together and hope that the dog was fine, he saw the flames dance and quickly lined up to both sides, like the return of a king. A husky walked out, with its head held high. Its hair was not messy at all, and it was full of energy. It even threw off its broken hood. It grinned in the vacuum and glanced at the stunned Huaishur in front of it with disdain. It was alive and kicking without the painful convulsions of ordinary creatures in the vacuum. It even sneezed and swung its saliva as if nothing had happened. At best, it was just not used to the smell. What kind of super creature was this? Huaishur walked around the dog 3 times, looking left and right. He raised his hand and scratched his head. He realized that he was really not as good as a dog. Then, after the dog had pretended to be cool enough, it finally lowered its head, opened its mouth, and threw the thing it took out from the wreckage of the airborne capsule at Huaishur's feet. It then raised its head and glanced at him with pity. It had a mocking expression that said, "What would you do without me?" Huaishur's expression twitched, and he bent down to pick up the thing. He found that it was the thing he had just thrown out in the turbulence, the iron ball beacon given by the Helios workshop. Now, that thing was actually operating on its own. It felt hot. Layers of nested complex structures unfolded on their own, and a beam of light emerged from it, outlining a blurry projection of an old man. It gradually became clear, revealing a resolute and cold face. It raised its eyes and looked at him. Galander? Huaishur subconsciously straightened his body. Then, an unfamiliar voice sounded directly from his soul. "Are you still alive?" The old man nodded and seemed to be relieved. Huaishur recalled the giant silver hand formed by the moon dust just now, and suddenly realized, was it you who helped just now? As a great master in alchemy, who was proficient in conversion chemistry, source matter, and fusion, he actually helped him on the moon from such a long distance away. This level of attainment had reached a miraculous level and was amazing, as expected of a great master. You don't have to thank me. It was the station master of Mitra Space Station who contacted me. Only then did I know what happened. Galander told him, "In the end, it wasn't of much use, but it's good that you're safe and sound." After a short communication, Huaishur finally connected to the Kepler base's channel. Unfortunately, due to the accident caused by this wave of impact, although he successfully landed on the ground, he was more than 200 kilometers away from his scheduled location. He landed in the no man's land. He was going to be late. "Don't worry," Galander said. "I've already informed the management of the Kepler base, and the search and rescue team is on their way to your place. No, there's no need for a search and rescue team." Huaishur thought for a moment and said seriously, "I'll arrive at the Kepler Valley base before I take off. There won't be any accidents, Mr. Galander. He said, there won't be any accidents. The old man seemed to be stunned for a moment, and his expression became serious. Don't try to be brave. Under the helmet, Weisher smiled. After a short silence, Galander seemed to understand something and nodded. Then, I'll wait for you before the scheduled departure time. He said, I hope you can make it. The communication was cut off, and the beam of light shrunk back into the rapidly closing beacon. Weisher threw it into his pocket. Okay, now he was done bragging. It was time to think about how to make it happen. Through the helmet, Beelzebub sensed his dangerous gaze. Instantly, the steel page trembled. No more, no more. There's really not a single drop left. Even if you ask me to change it for you, I won't be able to change anything. What a joke! Summoning Osiris Afterimage had almost drained all of Weisher's source substance. Moreover, without a physical body, it was like trying to fly, with an airplane blueprint. It was unrealistic. Look at you. You make it sound like I forced you to do something. Weisher looked helpless after being misunderstood. He could not help but sigh. Ha ha. Do you think I don't know you? An emoticon of rolling eyes appeared on Beelzebub's cover. Friendly reminder, Big Brother, you only have 3 hours of oxygen left. Why don't we stop building and call for help obediently? Isn't that better than anything else? Don't worry. I already have an idea. Weisher lowered her head, looked around, and began to rack her brain. He looked for anything that could be used. Well, things were scattered all over the toolbox. A bunch of cables. Then he found an iron rod. From the wreckage of the airborne capsule, he found 3 wheels of the airborne capsule that were used for sliding, as well as a frame whose purpose was unknown but was completely twisted. He also found a large enough iron plate. After collecting 2 welding rods and a welding torch, Zhang Zian began to work. Weisher turned around and looked at the dog that was jumping around happily in the pile of trash. He showed a gentle smile that had never been seen before. Come, brother dog. He hid the noose made of cables behind his back and called softly, I have something good for you, Kong Ikong. We shouldn't have waited for the thugs from the Astronomical Association. In the lounge, a middle-aged man wrapped in a blanket said angrily, It's no longer safe on the moon. We should take off immediately. Otherwise, if something were to happen, that's enough, Rachel. The man smoking a cigar on the sofa said, This is Galandon's decision. You can question it, but you must obey. Rachel's expression stiffened for a moment and then became gloomier. You were never attacked at all. Of course, you don't need my reassurance. You think I'm dreaming, right? Relax, Rachel. The man smoking the cigar sighed. Don't worry. You're safe here. Rachel sneered and wanted to retort, but in the end, he didn't say anything. After muttering something in a low voice, he closed his eyes. There was no more blood seeping out of the bandage on his abdomen. Behind him, the door of the operating room was still lit with a red light. Emergency surgery was in progress. In addition to Weisher, a total of 6 alchemists were attacked by unknown forces. There were 2 survivors. Earthquakes, air leaks, poisons, and even meteorites. Everything seemed to be an accident. Other than that, on the way here, the others more or less encountered abnormal events. It was as if everyone was cursed. Everyone had met with an accident. And what was disturbing was that the more profound the alchemist's attainment was, the more dangerous the accidents they encountered were, including the one who was right in the middle of it, Grand Master Galandon. Just outside the lounge, in a separate isolation room, a terrifying high temperature overflowed, turning it into a furnace. The rapidly operating dialysis machine couldn't get rid of the high heat. It was almost burned to ashes, but the skeleton was maintained by a miracle and didn't disappear. After filtering drop by drop of hot blood, it was transmitted back to the old body. Leaning on the chair, Galandon lowered his eyes. It was as if he was asleep. Only the lava-like blood flowed, silently. Chapter 835. Blood fever. That was what the alchemists called this symptom. It was a chain reaction caused by the precipitation of hell and abyss essence in the body. Over the years of contact with miracles and disasters, it was the alchemy poison that seeped into the body bit by bit. Overly large miracles and disasters were dependent on it. Once it entered the agitated stage, the source substance would quickly split, interfere with the body, and produce a terrifying high temperature. This was the love from the molten fire. The sick alchemist would instead be proud of it. If one did not go too far on this path, if one could not forge the purest miracles and disasters, it was absolutely impossible to have such deep karma. This was not a symptom that could not be suppressed and alleviated. It was even more so for Garland Ian. It was just that the timing was not right at such an awkward juncture. He could neither exchange blood nor cool it down with the silver cellar. In the environment on the surface of the moon, Garland Ian could only barely restrain himself. Through dialysis, the high heat in the body was dissipated at the fastest speed, and then injected with medicine to freeze and cool this high heat in a physical way. When the old man got up from the melting chair, half an hour later, there was no longer any burning breath on his body. Instead, it emitted a bone-piercing chill. His eyes turned into a frozen, pure white. When the door was pushed open, the noisy alchemists in the lounge finally calmed down. In a literal sense, they quieted down in the cold. The chill was pressing. Among the anxious alchemists, someone said, "Great Master, we must set off immediately. If we delay any longer, we don't know what will happen." Garland Ian held his cane and walked forward slowly. He just said indifferently, "There are still people who haven't arrived. Isn't everyone here?" A red-haired alchemist stood up and retorted, "How long are we going to delay? Just to wait for a latecomer." Ragnar Svaldson, the alchemist of the legendary This
Roman
was a technique
workshop,
unique to the
Silver
Nordic
Monument.
lineage.
This
Imitating the
middle-aged
ritual
man
carried out by
had
the
red
great
hair
god
in the
Odin,
literal sense
who
of
was
the
once
word.
omniscient.
It was
He
bright
hung
red
upside
like
down
fire,
in hell for
and there
7
were
days
strands
and
of
nights,
scarlet flowing
offering
through
one
his
of his
hair.
eyes, and
What
all
was
of his
more
vision to the
surprising
abyss to
was his
obtain
one
the
eye.
mutated
After
perception.
losing his left,
This was
eye,
also a
his
secret
right eye
method
became
in alchemy,
strange and
but
frightening.
sacrifices
His pupils
would not
moved
always
around
be
in his
rewarded.
eye socket
There were
without
very
any
few
pattern
who could succeed.
cold.
It was
and
also the
indifferent.
reason
Everything
why
was
he dared
revealed
to question
under the
great
reflection
grandmaster
of that eye.
He was not
including
far from
Grand
that boundary.
Master
It's
Garland
not time to go
in
yet.
front of him,
Ragnar,
in his eyes.
Garland looked at
The
him
old man was
calmly.
like a solemn
It is my
skeleton
duty
bathed
to
in
send
lava.
every
He wore a
invited
triple
alchemist
crown
to
on his head
Helios,
and held
an
a
executioner
three-pronged
of the
helical scepter
astronomical
in his
society.
hand.
He was
Don
both
was hero
majestic and hideous.
What has he done in
That
alchemy?
was Garland's true form
Ragnar
after
sneered.
discarding his weak appearance.
If you need
the form of
brainless
miracles
thugs,
and
aren't
calamities
there enough of them
created by
here?
himself,
Ragnar,
I
watch
of
your
truth.
words. A hoarse voice sounded, like iron scraping against each other. It was so sharp that it stung people's eardrums. In front of the window in the corner, A burly man leaning on a long scepter turned his head. He was not dressed like the other alchemists here, but wore a leather jacket and jeans that had weathered the vicissitudes of life, with a hunting knife at his waist. A cold light burst out from his eyes, and an out-and-out murderous intent emerged. He warned word by word, "There is a limit to a man's patience." It was Valery Yegorov, the master of metal of the Russian Federation, who had become enemies with Ragnar 10 years ago. Ragnar grinned and was about to retort, but Garland suddenly took a step forward and looked at him with his pale eyes. The coldness made his smile stiffen for a moment. Soon after, gloating laughter rang out from the crowd. "He won't be able to come." It was Rachel. The alchemist holding the silver mirror grinned and mocked indifferently, "Arrogant guy, he's simply digging his own grave." Under the prying of the silver mirror, the fluctuations of the source substance hundreds of kilometers away were projected, and the violent changes made everyone present shudder. No one knew what kind of fierce battle could cause such aftermath. Next to him, the young man smoking a cigar frowned slightly but did not speak. But then his movements stagnated, and his expression suddenly changed. His whole body slid down from the sofa as if he had been smeared with oil. He almost turned into an afterimage and instantly appeared behind Garland. Everyone was instantly alert. "Izzy, what the hell are you doing?" But before they could react, Garland's scepter suddenly fell to the ground. In a low voice, a complicated alchemy ritual emerged from the scepter. A brilliant glow emerged from the scepter, illuminating everyone's eyes. It was the most famous and widely known achievement in alchemy, Midas touch. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling golden light spread out, almost enveloping the entire lounge. But what was faster than it was the flames of the explosion? It was simply an accident that happened once in 100 years. A small leak from the water circulation system caused water seepage. The low temperature froze the rubber cable and caused a short circuit under the interference of the moisture, under layers of chain reactions. An open fire appeared in the maintenance room. A mechanic who was adding fuel was set ablaze. In the end, it triggered an explosion that swept across half of the base. The terrifying air pressure and temperature instantly spread from outside the lounge, destroying the walls and pouring into the room. Even the transformed gold could not completely stop the flying debris. But with the opportunity that Galandon had bought, every alchemist activated the border relics they carried with them. Layers of brilliance, flying metal or cold liquid rolled out, blocking the scorching blast that bore the brunt of the heat. But the loud sound of the explosion and the whine of the deck breaking mixed together. In the blink of an eye, the outermost deck of the lounge was torn into pieces. The vacuum endlessly sucked the thin air, forming a storm and pulling everyone out of the room along with the flames. The terrible low temperature, suffocation, and even the change in air pressure struck. Several alchemists rolled on the ground. Before they could get up, they sprawled in the moon dust, vomiting blood with difficulty. The sun is the father, the moon is the mother. The wind gives birth, the earth sustains. A low chant echoed in the rapidly thinning air. Then the symbols of the four elements emerged and intertwined. On the surface of the moon, under the reflection of the sun, the blowing of the wind, and the dancing moon dust, alchemy was completed in an instant from Garland's hands. An invisible blessing spread from beneath his feet, instantly enveloping most of the research base that was burning and exploding, bringing them precious oxygen and protection. A blessing was bestowed. Until now, there were still some who did not realize what had happened to them. Everyone was battered and exhausted. Only Izzy, who had the most agile reaction, was unscathed, and even had a cigar in his mouth. It was only after he brushed away the ashes that had fallen on his collar that he showed a look of lingering fear. There were also some who were coughing blood
violently under the drastic change in air pressure, even losing consciousness. Because work on the moon was full of danger, there was a comprehensive system of precautions and remedies. Soon, under the organization of the base's researchers, the search and rescue team began to quickly search for survivors. Several alchemists who had lost consciousness were sent to the temporarily modified operation vehicle for surgery. The rest of the people also changed into spacesuits. Except for the Grand Master, all were wrapped in thick protective clothing. Even so, accidents continued to happen. There was a hole in Ragnar's spacesuit, and Valerie's spacesuit was hit by the explosion and released pure oxygen. If it had not been carefully checked, it would have been completely undiscovered. The ashen-faced station master repeatedly assured everyone that he had checked it. He had also personally led the routine safety inspection yesterday, and there was no problem at all, except for the grumpy Ragnar, who was still angrily rebuking. The others' expressions suddenly became gloomy. There was no doubt that this was a curse, a calamity-level curse, a curse for all the alchemists present. "Sorry, I can't stand it anymore. I quit." A younger alchemist took a few steps back and said with a pale face, "I will pay the price for violating the contract, but I can't stand such an inexplicable thing happening to me." With that, he took out a relic from the border from his material bag. Although his heart ached, he still gritted his teeth and handed it over. But Gal Landon did not accept it. "The price for violating the contract will be paid by the Stone Cauldron Society. It is the Stone Cauldron Society's responsibility that this happened." Gal Landon glanced at him and said solemnly, "But is it okay to transfer your qualification?" The young man nodded. Soon, Gal Landon nodded, took the token from his hand, and handed it to a disciple behind him. The person who quit hurriedly left. "If anyone else wants to quit, I won't stop them. The conditions are the same as before," Gal Landon said. "Anyone else? It's almost time for takeoff. This is your last chance." In the end, a total of 4 people quit, and these 4 people's places were replaced by Gal Landon's disciples. The number of 30 people was not reduced, but the atmosphere was visibly gloomy. Standing on the cold surface of the moon, staring at the flames that kept coming out and extinguishing in the wreckage in front of them, everyone's face was gloomy and uncertain. Even though they were wrapped in thick spacesuits, they could still feel the deep coldness of outer space seeping into their bones, little by little. It made them want to shiver uncontrollably. Their breathing was out of balance. But in this silence, there was an intermittent sound in the channel. It was mixed with electric current, as if the signal was bad. It gradually became clear. So, the broken whistling gradually closed, and a cheerful tune echoed in everyone's ears with the sound of electric current. It was like a mockery from afar, making everyone's face gloomy. "Who the hell is whistling?" Valerie roared furiously. "Can't you shut the F***CK up?" At this time, to still turn on the public microphone and whistle, it was either brainless or heartless. But the whistling in the public channel did not stop at all. Instead, it became clearer. It became more cheerful. It was full of peace and joy, as if they felt happiness from the bottom of their hearts. In between the whistling, there were even people singing happily. "Ding, ding, dong. Ding, ding, dong. Bell, ding, dong. How happy we are. We are sitting on the sleigh." In the dead silence, only the sound of singing echoed. Everyone looked at each other and looked around. Finally, they noticed the figure that was gradually enlarging and appearing on the horizon in the distance. Countless silver-white moon dust flew up under the impact, as if it had turned into snowflakes, floating in the low-gravity vacuum. It was so beautiful. Under the pull of a huge dog-like creature, the rope made of twisted cables was pulled taut, and the rough sleigh rolled forward at an incredible speed. It was like a train galloping on the surface of the moon. Loaded with heavy gifts,
the bright red figure sitting on the front of the sleigh, was happily singing. Just like that, it passed through the silent land that no one had stepped on for thousands of years. It drifted, it sped up, it swung its tail, it rotated twice, and it was so happy that it even drove backwards. What is that? Wagner even wanted to lift his mask, rub his eyes, and ask dryly, Santa Claus? In the silence, no one responded. Everyone was stunned as they witnessed this strange scene that they had never seen in their deepest nightmares. On the moon, a person wearing a bright red spacesuit was sitting on a simple three-wheeled sleigh, holding the reins, galloping under the pull of a giant dog, and singing loudly. The dog was even wagging its tongue in the vacuum with a face full of excitement, as if it didn't feel uncomfortable at all. When its saliva fell to the ground, it froze into crystal frost. When countless flashes of moon dust flew up, it was as if Santa Claus in the wasteland fairy tale had descended here. Breaking through the heavy snow, he sat on the sleigh, galloping across the fields, laughing and singing. The laughter was long and drawn out. In the end, the sleigh stopped in front of them with a beautiful drift. Sorry, am I late? The driver jumped down from the sleigh, patted his head, and looked at the Kepler base that was still burning and exploding in front of him, as well as the 2 rows of figures. He was stunned for a moment. It was as if he was flattered. Wow, they actually lined up to welcome us. They even prepared a bonfire party. Why, Santa, Asher curiously asked, is the Stone Cauldron Society so enthusiastic? Silence. In the long silence, no one responded. Chapter 836. 10 minutes later, Weisher squatted next to the burning base and finally figured out what had happened. It exploded. He couldn't believe it. Yes, the base master looked miserable. It exploded. What about your restaurant? Weisher asked anxiously. The famous restaurant that makes flying pancakes on the moon, it's gone. The base master's expression became more and more sorrowful. The chef is dead. Weisher was angry. Is there something wrong with your lousy tour group? Kepler base was gone before they even saw it. Such a big base, with the 10 famous restaurants on the moon, blew up just like that. Wasn't there nothing wrong when they came? Weren't the space shuttle and Mitra space station fine? Why did it change as soon as they entered the orbit of the moon? Sitting in the airborne capsule, they ran into a meteor shower. It wasn't easy to make it in time for landing, but Kepler base was gone. More importantly, how was he going to explain it to the dog? How was he going to explain it to the dog? Sorry, the restaurant is gone. The flying pancakes are gone. Did you pull the sleigh in vain? I think you don't want to live anymore. Weisher covered her face with her mask as she felt the pain of her future. The dog beside the sled was already impatient from waiting for the flying biscuits that Weisher had promised. It was grinding its teeth against the frame of the sled. In the vacuum, there was no sound of grinding. Only sparks could be seen flying. It illuminated the bodies piled up behind the sleigh. It was extremely horrifying. This was the gift Santa Claus brought. The bodies of the attackers they encountered on the way. Unfortunately, every face frozen in the extreme cold was exactly the same, without any difference. After the alchemists finished their inspection, they all fell silent. All of them were artificial humans,
and they were the most common version, the most common type of production method, and there was no clue to trace them at all. And on Huaishi's shoulder, the unnoticed crow's phantom looked at everyone's appearance and gradually showed a meaningful smile. Aha, it's getting interesting. Tangi laughed softly. This curse is too innovative, so that's how it is. Curse? Huaishi asked. That's right. Don't you understand? Idiot? Tangi said, everyone here, or to be exact, everyone who went to the Helios workshop has been cursed. Huaishi was stunned for a moment and frowned, sensing that something was wrong. Logically speaking, he should be very sensitive to such things as a negative energy rocket. Moreover, every curse that fell on him would basically be repelled by his divinity, and he even had an additional destruction elemental derivative in his body. While it was inauspicious, it could be said that his life was getting tougher, and what horoscope could counter him? Moreover, don't forget about the Book of Destiny. Have you ever heard of a tenfold rebound? Those who did so would only die a horrible death. Also, why hadn't he noticed anything? It's very simple. Why, sure. The curse is just its form and result. It's simply ingenious. Ha ha ha. No, it should be said that in order to achieve the means, it doesn't care about the purpose. In the end, it uses anti-aircraft guns to kill mosquitoes, right? Tangi understood it all after observing all the alchemists, because the main body of its effect was not a single individual. Instead, it was everything they saw. To put it simply, it was the entire surface of the moon, all the way up to the orbital layer. Someone had secretly set up a secret apparatus so large that it could cover the entire moon. Everyone who entered it. No, to avoid triggering more symptoms if the scope was too large, and to conserve power, the host of the secret apparatus had narrowed the targeted area. It was just targeted at all alchemists, everyone who held the beacon of the Helios workshop. Due to the sheer size of the arcanum, the power distributed to every part of the arcanum grew thinner. Moreover, separated by a thick spacesuit, every alchemist did not notice the tiny signs that wrapped around them. None of them noticed the malice the moon had towards them. That was why Tangi lamented that it was like using anti-aircraft guns to kill mosquitoes. If the mountain doesn't come, I'll go. If there's no way to make the sun revolve around the earth, wouldn't it be the same if the earth revolves around the sun? Instead of having people step into the pit was moved to their feet. With such mastery and ability, it was almost possible to affect the moon's operation, while it merely pushed the environment to the opposite side of everyone. Instead of dealing with fate itself, it subtly manipulated probability to shift everything to the side of misfortune. It was as if a miracle had been turned into a calamity. Every stroke of luck would be turned into an equal amount of misfortune before it happened, and an equal amount of misfortune would stack with an equal amount of misfortune. Nothing good would happen, and accidents would happen frequently. It was not as simple as spending a few $1,000s to draw a 5-star character from a card pool. In this airless vacuum, on the surface of the moon that was filled with terrible cold, there was only death if any accident happened. But with such an ability, sending those androids to attack the alchemists was a little too superfluous. It was really puzzling. But now, although it was a little late, everyone had finally noticed the malice. Who was the one who created such a strange disaster? The moment he understood, Ragnar seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly raised his one eye and looked coldly at Rachel. Behind the helmet, Rachel's expression could not help but twitch. Why are you looking at me? Because I have a question for you, Rachel. Ragnar took a step forward and asked, "Where did you go before you came to Kepler Base?" Rachel was taken aback, and then immediately became angry. I didn't go anywhere. Why are you asking this? Didn't go anywhere. Ha! I took the Egyptian space station to the moon's central hub at the same time as you. But why did you come a day later than me? Ragnar pressed on step by step, looking down at the old friend in front of him through the mask. Where did you go? I didn't go anywhere. I was stuck in a traffic jam. Rachel retorted with his eyes wide open. Why should I tell you where I went? Ha! I can guess even if you don't tell me. Just half an hour before you arrived, something suddenly happened in the dark side prison. Do you think there's something to do with it? Ragnar sneered, a cold light shooting out of his one eye, his palm pressed against his waist, ready to strike. Don't try to quibble, Rachel. The alchemy array of the dark side prison was made by our workshop, and I can see the residual disaster stain on you at a glance. You must have been in the dark side prison recently. Rachel's voice became sharp. It has nothing to do with you. Then why are you lying? Ragnar raised his voice and asked sternly, what are you hiding with this secretive attitude? He paused and asked word by word, what does the death of Grandmaster Publius have to do with you? As soon as he said this, everyone froze in place. They looked at each other. Publius Augustus, the Grand Master who rose to prominence 80 years ago, the silver staff wielder, the Manificent, the Wanderer, the explorer of the seventh creation and existence who stood at the peak of source materials. He actually died so abruptly, it was unbelievable. Even Rachel stiffened. He stared blankly at the person in front of him. He couldn't believe his words. He's dead? He staggered back a step and immediately screamed, crazily. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. He was just accompanying me, Ragnar. An old voice sounded. It was Galander, the old man calmly explained. As an apothecary under the orders of the Stone Cauldron Society, Mr. Rachel accompanied me to check on Publius's physical condition before we set off. This was a secret mission, and he was forbidden to speak of it to anyone. Are you satisfied with this answer? Ragnar fell into silence. It was as if he couldn't understand why another Grandmaster would be involved in Publius's death. He thought darkly, perhaps Publius's death was Galander's doing, or perhaps the Stone Cauldron Society was happy to see this happen. When he thought of Publius's numerous unique technologies and patents, everything seemed to be explainable, but the water behind this was a bit too deep. What he had originally thought to be a deep pool had turned into a pitch-black and tyrannical ocean, and Galander didn't dare to look into how Ragnar knew about Publius's death. After all, the base of the alchemy array of the Shadowside prison was made and maintained by the workshop he was in, the Silver Steel. Such a big thing had happened, and he was on the moon. Logically and emotionally, his senior apprentice brother would have informed him as soon as possible. I know what you want to ask, Ragnar, and I can answer you. Although I don't know the origin of this curse, I can conclude that it has nothing to do with Publius's death. Galandian then revealed another great secret. Oh my God! Although his Alzheimer's was most likely a disguise, as early as 15 years ago, Publius's soul had already begun to gradually wither, and his source substance had decayed. All that was left was a skeleton. Otherwise, he wouldn't have died so tragically in the process of breaking out of prison. Amidst everyone's silence, Galander finally said, "The current state of his death is still sealed. Before the results of the investigation are out, we can't announce it to the public, and I hope you won't spread it." Ragnar bowed his head and didn't speak again. On the side, Weischer, who had dug out the kitchen refrigerator from the ruins with great difficulty and was feeding the dog vacuum pancakes, raised his head in confusion. He felt that he had missed an earth-shattering melon. "What are you talking about?" Just like that, 10 minutes later, the chicken finally finished the rice the fire burned through the lock, and the dog finished the pancakes after many twists and turns at the predetermined time, place, and alchemists were finally about to embark on the final journey toward their final destination, the Helios workshop. When the search and rescue team cleaned up the ruins of the base and found Ragnar's body, it was already 6 hours later. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.